Dan is not coming. He had a previous commitment. I did talk to him though, so kind of filled him in on some of the stuff we're going to talk about. I have a list of 8 different things I want to make sure we cover for next year's budget. It doesn't have to all be today, but the one thing I'd like you to do right off the bat is keep these binders. Once the finals are done, the budget's complete, we can have the pages replaced. If you've got binders and old budgets and stuff at home, bring them in. Get rid of the binders. You don't need them. We'll keep buying them every year. It's just a waste.
Yeah.
So let's just keep one binder. We'll just take the pages out every
I'll bring
year.
mine in from last year and the year before.
That's right, yes.
I kept mine too.
Yeah, bring them in. If you want to keep the paperwork, that's up to you.
No,
But we don't need to keep
I
buying
looked at it
binders.
yesterday.
Just binders every year. And the tabs and all that, that's too expensive. We'll just replace it.
Good idea.
Okay, so that's the first thing. I did hand out the sheriff's contract. I know we emailed it to you a few weeks ago, but now you've got it. You can put it in the binder with you. I 3-hole punched it. You also got the MTA survey synopsis. If you remember last year, or maybe you don't, Michigan Township set this program up, and they asked for as many of the 1,240 townships as possible to submit their information. We did last year, but for some reason when they did their update this year, it didn't keep it. So I didn't go back and put everything back in. John filled some stuff in. We got fire department input and everything. We had to fill out demographics, what our SEV is and what our population is and square miles and the whole shot. So MTA has all that. As a result, this wage summary it's pages and pages, and I can give it to you, if you want to look at it, but this is what applies to us. And you can see the current wages, what the lowest wage is that MTA has recorded, and what the highest wage is, and then what's kind of in the middle. So we're going to talk about wages later. We're going to talk about the wages for not only the board members, but our paid committees. Yeah, like Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, Board of Review. We're kind of woefully lacking in some of these, which is why we went ahead and did the summary. So we don't have to talk about that right now. I just wanted to make sure you keep it with your stuff because it's going to be part of the discussion. John didn't have the narrative ready. I told him not to worry about it. I don't know how many of you actually read that or if it's important to you. Not that he can't do it later. This is all preliminary anyway. The final document can be the final document. So he's got some time to work on it if and when, it is important because it gives an overall.
I agree, but I think for the purposes of the work sessions, what's in the comments in the right column is really what we want to focus on. And by the time we come out of here, that narrative may change anyway.
True. Okay. Do you want to just start on page 1 and go right down?
Yeah.
Kind of see where we are? John's comments are a lot more comprehensive than Randy's words, so that's the other reason I figured the narrative wouldn't be as critical. Looks like it's pretty much the same. John, why don't you take it away?
First, let's look at the 2022 columns. You'll see that we had an original revenue budget total of $2.61 million. Our current estimate is up to $2.62 or $3 million. So our revenues are projected to be above what we had originally budgeted, and that's generally what we do on the budgeting side is estimate revenues that are lower than we think we are actually going to get so that we don't overspend. And then on the expenditures, we estimate more than we think we need to spend so that, again, we're covered 2 ways, and then the net result will be a gain in fund balance at the end of the year.
Protect yourself.
Yep, it's a double protection. underestimate the revenues, slightly overestimate the expenditures, and hope that we have a net gain in fund balance at the year end. So 2022, it looks like we did a pretty good job of underestimating the revenues based on what we're projecting for year end. There is a little bit of a reduction in tax revenue from original projections to final projection, but the remaining portions of the revenue stream in the budget will get us over our original total. So the 2023 revenue projections are very status quo. The biggest differences you'll find in there, we did put a $50,000 item in there for the marijuana tax. You may remember we had about 56,000 that we received for 2021 this year. That was based on one licensed facility. We now have 2 licensed facilities open and operating, plus a grow and processing facility coming online. So, 56,000 for one license. We know the value in tax revenue per license is going to slowly start going down. So we just put a number in there of 50,000. That's less than we got for one license, meaning we could get double of that for 2 licenses next year. And I don't know yet what the revenue implications are for growing and processing facilities.
That's gonna be a year away though, too. At least a year. That'll be like 24 before we start seeing it.
Possibly. I certainly didn't want to put anything in there not really knowing what the law states as far as revenues for those facilities, because they're not selling at these facilities. They're only creating, right? So there's probably not a net benefit other than the property tax value. So it's
After they grow, where's it going?
it's going to the retail facilities.
To sell it at the retail stores.
Right. Once it's sold at the retail stores, the state collects the tax on it and it distributes it based on the number of licensed retail facilities.
They're not going to tax the retail store?
Yeah.
No, they are.
do
It's a
tax.
sales tax.
No, when they grow it and then they sell it to the retailers. That's a transaction.
I can't tell you all the details of the state's
All right.
taxing. I can only tell you what we can expect to get, and we're estimating it as conservatively as we feel comfortable
That's
estimating
good.
it.
All
That
right.
should be their income tax anyway, that they would pay on their profit.
I think a lot of what they do on these grow and processing facilities is probably business license related. Without reviewing the law on it, I don't know that we can anticipate sales tax revenues from a growing and processing facility because they're not selling it there. They're only distributing it to their various stores throughout the state.
Don't we get a $5,000 like a license fee from each one of them?
It's
too?
a renewal, it's an annual renewal, and I think our ordinance requires it to be $5,000. No,
Where does that show up then, or where would it?
it's under fees, licenses and fees.
Okay. Okay.
Might be actually the zoning permits and fees.
So John, we're annually getting $5,000 from each facility? Because the
They
planning
have to
commission
renew.
thought that we were not.
I think there's a $5,000
Annual
annual
fee?
renewal fee.
Yeah, that was part of the ordinance.
Now,
Um,
keep in mind, if things start getting tight with some of these businesses, they have the right to fight that fee if they think it's excessive. So if it ever comes down to that, we may have to revisit what our actual fee ends up being.
I think it's
Probably will.
per license, so if they're,
It is. Every license that we have has to be renewed annually, so
they
there's 2
have.
right now.
Right. No, but I
Plus
mean,
the new facility that's growing.
wouldn't it be on the recreational side and the medical side for each place?
Possibly, yeah, that would make
So it might
sense.
be 5
There's
for
2
each.
separate licenses, one recreational, one adult recreational, one medical.
Okay. I was just wondering where it went, so.
Although I don't recall that both facilities have adult recreational and medical.
Yeah, I don't know
Jason would know that, and we can get you that answer if it's important enough. That's just one of those incremental in the big scheme of things, small fees, that adds up to a bigger line item in the budget. So zoning permits and fees, we have 6,500 in there. That's not where a $5,000 annual renewal would show up, because that would put us over 6,500 in a hurry. I'm just looking for any other place where we might find that in the budget. And Kim and I can look into this too.
I have it written down.
Lois trained her well. She already has it written down to look into it.
Kim, you can sit up here on the end if you want,
Oh, I'm
rather
okay,
than try
thank you.
to.
I'm actually along on the wall,
Okay, all right,
but thank you.
You might recall Lois sat back there too.
yeah.
So the only other thing I did in this budget for revenues that's of significance compared to the current or prior years is the wastewater transfer in of $10,000. You may remember we talked about this in prior years. If we ever go after USDA funds and they see these direct transfers from the enterprise funds to the general fund, they will not consider funding any project we have. And I don't know that I can tell you why we need to do that transfer in from wastewater, other than to cover administrative fees. But if we're doing it for wastewater, there should be one for water as well. We know that the water fund was in trouble for a while. So whenever this started, that's probably what was happening. I just don't think that this is the right way to cover administrative costs associated with enterprise fund duties.
What would you recommend then?
If we're going to change, and $10,000 is not a significant number on our bottom line from
No.
revenues, because we're offsetting that by 5 times just with our marijuana revenues, right? Marijuana tax revenues. We would properly allocate our administrative staff's time to the various budgets where they're spending their time.
That's
So-
what we were doing.
Well, and I feel like we are. Kim, do you recall, does your time, some of your time get distributed to water and wastewater? Okay, so that's what we need to do.
Okay.
It's primarily her time. And maybe a little bit of Andra's time, but not a lot, because Lenny has Brenda helping him with a lot of that stuff.
So just from what you just said, it may be something we need to look at more in depth if we go after those grants and that too, so how we identify them.
The first step in even considering RD funding is to eliminate these transfers from enterprise funds to the general fund or vice versa. And it's generally the transfers out to the general fund that raises the red flag with them.
But by putting in the correct wording for administrative charge and listing out what it is, then it should be fine, I would think.
It cannot show up as a direct transfer. It needs to show up as direct expenses. So
Right, and the
wages,
expense.
benefits, that
So
kind
no
of thing.
revenue.
Right.
Yeah, just get rid of it then. Sounds like a great.
Right now, I think it's easy enough to get rid of it, and then we will start evaluating how much of Kim's and Andra's time is actually needs to be redistributed to water and wastewater. But keep in mind, all we're doing is playing a little bit of a shell game with numbers, right? In that it still costs us the same to pay all of our staff based on the contracts we signed with them. It's just a matter of whether it comes out of your general fund or your enterprise funds.
But it's an expense that the enterprise fund needs to look at. Really, our accountants should look at that too as an
Yeah.
expense.
But keep in mind also, when our former staff planner was here, we reallocated some of his wages and benefits to water and wastewater because he was real heavy into the GIS work for Lenny. Our new staff planner is more code enforcement heavy. So he's not doing the GIS stuff, it's just not his skill set. And we knew that when we hired him. So Lenny's still paying for some of the staff planner's time, but he's not getting the GIS work anymore. So it all balances out. We just have to catch up on the wage and benefits.
You have to go back and do an analysis what's going on.
Yeah, we need to shuffle it, and I don't think it's significant enough to worry about, but we will correct it moving forward.
It's significant if we want to go after grants, because it's going to affect us in that too. So.
Yes. Anytime they see transfer in from water, transfer in from wastewater, if we're looking for that funding from them for either of those funds, they're going to say, we won't give you a dime until you eliminate that direct transfer.
Makes sense.
Because you're getting money.
Yeah, they don't want to give us any support if we're
Supporting ourselves.
fluffing our general fund up with no backup for it.
So you anticipate the revenue to be what is listed here?
Yeah.
Based
the,
on-
the net increase in revenue over our current year and projection is about $20,000 to the better. And
Sure.
the biggest changes are an additional $50,000 in revenue from the marijuana tax and eliminating the $10,000 transfer in from wastewater.
Yeah, and we got additional money in the state revenue sharing as well because of our population.
There is
So-
an increase, but keep in mind the state revenue sharing projections are based on the state's fiscal year,
Correct.
which goes until the end of October. So what works in most years is to take their fiscal year projection and use that as our fiscal year projection because they generally go up for the next one. They don't always, but generally they do.
We had a good year in Michigan.
Yeah, we won't know that until October or November.
Of next year.
Yeah.
So if we go with our current projected allocations from the state for the whole year, and they increase from October to the end of the year, it is again conservative.
So we're looking good.
I think so. That being said, if you look at the bottom line, the net effect on the very last page of the general fund, this budget is slightly less positive. Instead of a projected $67,000 net effect, we're at about $59,000, so about $10,000 less. That being said, there's plenty of wiggle room in what we're proposing here, things that we can or don't have to do. And that's where you come into play. And a lot of that is basically, I would say, in the CIP, because our wage and benefit costs are dictated for the next 4 years. This is year one of a 5-year contract. My contract will renew a year sooner than that, but for the next 3 years, that's dictated also. Except for my performance, right? Because part of my compensation is performance-based. So, I would still say it's a pretty good budget. If you look at prior year's budgets when they were presented, the net effect was 0. So, 100% balanced, right? We want to be as fiscally responsible as possible. If that net effect is above 0, we know that's the wiggle room we have throughout the year when things come up, which happens all the time. Without having to dip into the fund balance, it's what we think we can cover with next year's revenues. So I think there's many ways to argue this, that if I presented a budget with a 0 net effect, it shows a balanced budget, but we want to be continually growing that fund balance so that we can pay off our debt quicker, things that have been discussed longer than I've been in this position, which we'll get to in a little bit, by the way. And it gives us the flexibility when projects come up that we don't think we should wait on. We can take care of them and not worry about the fund balance being impacted negatively. So,
Do we know
hopefully-
how many months we have of fund balance right now? You and I talked about that, but I don't know if I forgot.
We do, and I think that paper is sitting on my desk.
I was just wondering. That's okay.
If we paid off the solid waste loan that the general fund took from solid waste, which was $156,000, I believe, we would still have 8 months of operating revenue on hand as of the end of September.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah, because I originally used the end of August numbers, and then I realized we have more current data than that.
And Kim, if you hear something you don't get, holler.
So the general fund balance is in a pretty good position, and that's why we really need to be looking at cleaning up some of these items that are just sort of lingering out there, not really going away unless we take specific action to do so. That loan from the solid waste fund, we're in a position to pay it off. And I think we should do that at year end before we close the books.
Didn't we have that sheet in here?
Uh,
Maybe it wasn't updated. Remember I asked you about that with all the loans? I've got a copy
Oh, I
of it.
gave you a copy.
Okay, that should be in here too then.
It will
Okay.
be, it will be before
Yeah.
budget is
Okay,
final.
just so you don't forget.
I'll put it on.
I could have copied that too, but,
Along those lines, I think Lenny has a small loan that has about $50,000 in balance on it. In
Not
the
Lenny.
water fund, if I remember.
The water fund has a loan. Right, not Lenny.
Yeah.
Lenny is the administrator, that's what I'm referring to. I get it. It's not Lenny's debt, it is the enterprise fund that he is managing.
Yeah, good job. I can just hear the public.
So if we pay that off, and all of a sudden, we're gonna have quite a fund balance on solid waste then, in that 2 fund.
Yes, and then you can consider what you want to do with that.
Yes.
I wouldn't just loan it directly back to the general fund, because what purpose do you need it for now? Unless you're gonna pay off more debt and then you just, the general fund owes solid waste again.
Or we're going to use it for a capital improvement project.
Well, not from
not
solid
for
waste,
solid waste.
because it's solid waste fees that are
Oh, okay, all right, let's.
paying for that. So
yeah,
you
let's-
have an opportunity to maybe offset
Solid waste.
your utility, that portion of the utility bill
Mm-hmm.
for a period of time. But it's not sustainable either, so those are all the things you have to think about. As the fund balance gets drawn down, you put yourself that much closer to an increase. There's maybe some balance there. But also remember that that money was actually set aside for the landfill closure fee. So,
Yes.
Nobody knows what that total should be.
And I don't know if any municipality officially has a responsibility to be setting money aside for that.
They're supposed to, at $5 we pay into the to wastewater, solid waste, there's supposed to be $5 going into their closing fund, but I never see it on their financial statements either. So,
Well, maybe that's the question we need to be asking them. Because if we don't need to have our own closure fund, then we don't need a huge fund balance in there, and we can potentially save our customers some money for a few years. We could look into that.
yeah.
But let's put the money back in the fund it belongs first. That's my recommendation.
John, is it better to reduce the, say you got extra and you say, well, we can reduce their rate of garbage collection or something like that. Isn't it better just to leave it alone and don't increase it in years to come?
So that's the best way to do it, because you're keeping it stable and you're drawing down the fund balance slower, as opposed to reducing the rate. If you reduce the rate, you also have to change all the settings in our software too. There's more chance of mistakes happening.
And if something happens, then you have to raise it again, and it's, oh, there it goes, raising it again.
We talked about the same thing with water and sewer over the
Right.
years, right? I
Anything like
mean,
that.
we don't want them bouncing all over the place.
Right.
If anything, they should just slowly be climbing so that you don't have to do a big jump.
Right.
I'm sorry, I should be doing this, because you guys need the mirror of what I'm seeing. We want a gradual increase in rates, not big jumps. That being said, there's been a lot of operational changes made over the past few years where keeping the water and sewer rates flat has been justified. You know, we do have contract wage and impacted benefit increases coming for the next 4 years. So I would guess at least by the end of this contract, we'll have to increase water and wastewater rates. But that's still not the biggest reason why we have to look at rates. It's the long-term replacement costs of our infrastructure. so that we don't have to rely on, let's call it low interest loans, because we're not in a position to get very many grants from Eagle or USDA. We're not considered disadvantaged. In fact, we don't even score high enough on most of them to even get on the list. The most recent drinking water revolving loan fund application we made, we were 4th from last out of, I don't know, over 200 applications. So we just can't get the points. That's the penalty for being a well-managed
I was
system.
just going to say, that's not all bad.
And in the big scheme of things, if it means you're only going to get a loan anyway, if we don't have to pay the insurance, why wouldn't we want to pay cash, right?
Yeah.
It's still cheaper for the customer if they pay in small increments by the month instead of small increments plus interest, right? So, okay, that was a little bit of a rabbit hole from general fund discussion, but all part of the big picture. Would you like to move on to expenditures? Or are we still having questions about revenues? Keep in mind, too, I put no change for a couple of these, but it was a rounded number to match current year budget, so it probably went down a little bit. I never rounded up, I always rounded down. So penalties, interest on taxes, the current budget year we had $2,795, I rounded it down to $2,700. And the reason I felt comfortable doing that is through the end of June, which was half of the way through the year, we hadn't seen more than half of our current budgeted revenue for that. So maybe that means we have more people paying their taxes on time, and that's great, right? We certainly don't want to rely on penalties as a necessary revenue, but we know we'll have some. Okay, moving on to expenditures, I'd like to focus generally by cost center. And let's start with elected officials. This goes back to the MTA wage study summary that Supervisor Durant provided. You will see, if you compare the left column, the current township wage column, to the MTA middle wage column, which is historically what this township has been targeting. In some cases, we're doing fine. In other cases, we're not. So the supervisor's wage is almost right where it needs to be if you're shooting for the middle. I would not recommend a wage reduction for what amounts to $204. I think based on the amount of effort that we get on a daily basis, I'm not here to do a performance evaluation on the supervisor or any of you, by the way. I'm just saying, based on what I see, as long as the supervisor is comfortable with this, I recommend we go with the historic 2.5% increase that we've kind of adopted over the last couple of years, and that's how the full-time contracts were negotiated this past year, right? Focusing on at 2.5%. So the supervisor's salary would see a 2.5% increase. There's the adjustment in Social Security as a result and no other changes. I think that's pretty straightforward as long as the board agrees that we should stick with that 2.5%. It is less than inflation, by the way, this year by a lot. So if you think 2.5 isn't adequate based on the current economic conditions, we do have room to go to match inflation, but that's not what we gave the employees. So
We just stay where we are.
stay at 2.5%. Okay. So professional services, you'll see there's no change for the first three lines. The accounting services line, the audit does go up a bit. And that should be expected, especially in a year where you have still a relatively new administrator and a relatively new accountant. But inflationary costs as well. So $5,500 up from $4,800. And you'll see that's actually a little bit more than what we've already paid this year. But what we paid this year, we had some additional effort from them for ARPA reporting. That won't be an annual thing, so I believe that number is conservative and we should be covered under professional services.
How many more years do we have on their contract? Do you know off that, John?
I do not, but I think they give us a proposal on an annual basis.
Okay. Kim is saying yes.
I believe so, yeah.
And for the cost of what they're proposing, I think we're doing pretty good. That being said, we can reach out locally to the local firm and ask them for a proposal. See what they
Seems
say.
like it was a 3-year agreement.
Yeah.
It seems like I remember that.
It was the best out there,
Yeah.
too.
Yep.
Can you back up a second?
Sure.
The elected officials, township board, those are the trustees at the top. The first, the one who we just did when you said township board,
You're right.
just so you
Yep.
know.
The township board is where the trustees show up, so it would be a 2.5% increase over what you are currently being compensated. And you'll see, if you divide 16,617 by 4, it's just over $4,000 a year for each of the 4 trustees. It's not a lot.
So that's where we're staying with the status quo rather than going down to the, you know, you were saying that the MTAs go back and forth.
Yep. Yeah, that happens to be one where it looks like we're doing better than the MTA average, but based on the workload, the bi-monthly meetings, it's probably justified. A lot of townships, Chocolate is a perfect example, right nearby, only meet once a month. So it's okay to be a little bit high on this stuff.
So I have a question. Under travel and conferences, we've spent a total of $50 this year.
Yep.
So next year we allocated the same amount, but this year no one went to the annual MTA conference, and I'm guessing next year people are going to feel safe enough to go. Can we move that money that was not spent forward, or does it just sit in the pot and we readjust the budgeted item
You
as
can
we
do
get
it however
closer?
you want to do it. If you think we're not going to spend any more money in that budget, we can, this year.
Trustees, are you going anywhere in the next 2 months?
No.
No education?
Yeah, nothing going on there.
We can
Most of
reduce
us
it.
show up at the meetings.
No,
This is
John.
travel.
This is travel to the state convention. I mean, it's
Michigan
travel
Township
or stuff
Association
up
Annual
here.
Conference.
Yeah, it's not showing up at a meeting. Yeah,
It's for, yeah.
It just rolls
education.
forward if you don't spend it next year.
it will roll forward?
It will. yeah.
Okay.
Well, it
No,
it
it
goes
goes
to
into
the
the
fund
fund
balance.
balance.
Yeah,
It rolls over into the fund balance.
Yeah.
It just goes into the pot.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
we
it's
don't
just
use-
something to think about, so the pot's gonna be quite full because,
But then we've allocated that same amount for next year, so it basically
Right.
rolls
If
forward.
we had 4
Yeah.
trustees that decided they wanted to go next year,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to do a budget amendment to make
It's
that
okay to
happen,
do that?
remember this conversation,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what I'm
Because that's what
saying.
Kim and I will be coming to you for.
Mm-hmm.
To say, look, you only spent $500 last year, we had the conversation, we
Yeah.
left the budget the same because on average, that's about what it ends up being.
That's my question.
Yep.
Along with, some of these other things, printing and publishing, we spent a small amount of money on many things.
Yeah, the key on that is, look back at the 3 prior years as well. You'll see it kind of fluctuates, right? And this is where we budget conservative. We try to take the higher number in all of them so that when we underspend on all of them, we don't have to do a budget amendment because the cost center is below budget.
Okay, all right, that's how they've run that, okay.
Yep.
But next year you have a new trustee, and they should, hopefully they send them, and he decides to go to some of these conferences, because you learn so much more there than you do just reading things.
Yeah, but
I
even
would
here,
strongly encourage that.
the
Yes.
people that are sitting here haven't gone, I haven't gone.
Well, it's a reason you're not going. You didn't come to the meeting last week, that's what we voted. No, I mean, I think it's very, educational when you do go, and you learn a lot at night versus just.
Yeah, and if you can't go to the statewide conference, there's usually a conference in the UP as well, where you would only go to Escanaba or Harris as opposed to.
Okay, well, just so everyone's clear on how that works.
Yep. I think it's important for the public to know too, if they're paying attention to that.
Okay.
We're not spending a ton of money, but when you do go, it's great networking, it's great education, all of that. And we haven't spent really much money on that at all in the last 3 years. Because COVID, travel has been very limited.
Even though you think, what the heck are we doing up here? But you go down there and you talk to some of these other townships and we're all right.
Yep.
We're doing good.
Right. And Supervisor Durant, thank you for pointing out too, that that's the trustees, because that would have given you a $1,300 pay raise if it was.
Yeah, I was just waiting till you got all finished and.
Then you'd have to join the union, punch card.
What do you got against unions?
No.
Okay. We all good on the first two cost centers?
Yeah.
All right. Township supervisor, same thing. Well, actually, we talked about it. We were just looking at the wrong cost center because I was not paying attention to the cost center title. So it's that 2.5% increase, which is a slight increase over a number that's right around the MTA average. And I think that's a pretty solid number. I didn't hear any objections in my prior conversations with the supervisor about it. Hopefully we're in agreement with that 2.5% across the board until we get to the clerk discussion, which we'll have in a minute. So otherwise, no significant changes there. Travel and conference, same thing as with the trustees. Supervisor has not traveled. There's been some mostly virtual training happening, but the year that we do actually send anyone to the conference, that money will be there to cover the costs, hopefully. All right. Are we ready to move on to my budget?
Do we have to?
Well,
I'm just,
you could terminate the agreement early, yes.
yeah.
You do have that option. There's an out clause in pretty much every agreement.
I think that budget's going to look all right.
Yeah, just keep going.
Okay, so
The biggest thing is that hospitalization. That's the big elephant in the room.
yeah, so this is the first chance we have to talk about what we assume for this budget. We assumed a 10% increase in medical insurance, okay? After we put the budget together, we did get some ballpark numbers from our insurance agent, and he said 5 to 6. Last year, we assumed the 10 based on what he told us, and I think it was just a little over 11. This year, hopefully, we're going to balance that out a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep. So if it's only 5 to 6, we'll have a good year for health insurance costs with a direct renewal. That being said, I did talk to them about any other options they might have available, and I'm trying to get to a point of getting other local insurance firms to provide us competitive bids on all of our insurance policies. So this one might be the most challenging because the number of companies in Michigan that actually cover health care anymore is very limited beyond Blue Cross Blue Care. In fact, the UP Blues program is going away. There's a different program that will replace it, and I think he intends to give us a cost comparison between that and what we currently have. So,
I think VAST has been really good for the staff, though. I haven't heard any.
yeah, I don't really have any concerns there. It's probably some of the other ones, but when we talked about insurance renewals, we talked about all reasonable options, and it wasn't specific just to our general liability covers and that kind of thing. So we're doing what we can to look at all of our options on as many as possible, knowing that we wanted to do it last year and just didn't get to it. So this just means I need to be more efficient with my time. Okay. There's no other significant changes proposed in my budget either. I think the biggest thing is under supplies, I kept it the same as the current year. The current year I bought myself a new office chair because the one I had was too big. The seat was longer than my upper leg. And we bought that monitor for the wall. in my office, which has come in handy a few times, especially for virtual training situations. I don't have anything specifically picked out to spend $1,000 worth of township money on supplies for next year. So hopefully we'll be able to adjust that down in the 2024 budget because we won't have spent much. That's my plan.
Do you have to replace that chair that's in the hallway that's busted, or can it be fixed? I'm not trying to get
Andy's
cheap.
planning on repairing that.
Okay.
And I don't know if we'd ever be able to find a match, but if we're down to 2 and feel like we need 3, then that might be one of the expenses that could come out of it.
So I was thinking, okay.
The other 2 are still in pretty good shape though, so I'm not in a rush to do anything about those if he can repair the one that's partially pulling apart. All good on my budget? All right, on to the clerk. This is where there may be some opportunity for discussion, but I think it's timely and important, and that is specifically related to compensation, and it's directly related to the increase in weekly FOIA requests, the increase in election responsibilities specifically, and just overall workload. I've talked this over with the supervisor and the clerk, and I think they are in agreement that the clerk's compensation should be adjusted to match the supervisors. And I would let them speak for themselves if they have any objections to that.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, you know, historically, the workload has increased a lot. Because there's years I'd get 1 or 2 FOIA requests. I'm getting them every other week now. Elections are becoming more complex, as you all know, more requirements, and I'm just quite frankly putting a lot more time in than I used to. So, and I think you all know I'm here a lot. So, and I'm only looking at, because me and the supervisor are in the treasurer, but me and the supervisor have the more responsibilities for the township and for the records and such. I think we should be both the same. And I've looked in other townships, that's the way they handle it. The supervisor and the clerk are both the same.
When I was in
salary.
Chocoway, they made that exact same move.
Yeah.
So when Randy first suggested this, I didn't look at it from my perspective, I looked at it from the township's perspective. And at some point, you all know that it's real hard to decrease wages on the board. It's a process. And I was thinking, well, what if Randy retired next year and his replacement comes in? Are they going to be as conscientious and as IT knowledgeable? So would you be paying a high wage for someone who didn't necessarily do as much as Randy does? Same thing on mine, the 3 of us have had this conversation over and over, and I think even a few times with Ernie. When I'm gone, is my successor going to be doing kind of the things that I do? Is he going to go to all the meetings, or she, So my concern was the wage for the position. But even in those couple months, 2 or 3 months that Randy mentioned it this summer, that I've had a chance to talk about it, his workload's increased just then. So I started thinking more of the responsibility and realizing that at least we're equal. And you can see that some clerks even do more. They don't have office staff, so they have to do everything themselves. So I totally agree with at least our wages being the same. And, that could change next year when we look at the next budget. Who knows?
Well, and I feel too, if someday when I'm gone or retire, whatever, I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon,
Please do not.
but I think the increased compensation will attract better candidates too. And they'll have to come in and they'll have to realize this is what you do. You don't, I do have staff, but they
It's
don't
not a
do.
ceremonial title by any stretch of the
No, I do
imagination.
have staff, but they don't do my minutes. I do my own, and I do postings. And
Interestingly, in other places where the clerk is being compensated the same as the supervisor, they don't even do their own minutes.
yeah, well, I don't.
They have clerical staff that do the minutes for them.
I don't
So-
think that's correct, but that's my view. But the thing is I think there's justification there for that increase in the wage to match the supervisor, so, and I guess the rest of the board can comment if they so desire on that.
Yeah, John.
No, we're happy to have you, Randy. You do a great job.
Go ahead, John.
I've watched this over the years that I've been here, and I agree 100% that making the wages the same, supervisor and clerk, is a good move to compensate, and it's a good move to recognize what's happened over the years. It's been growing, and it's growing astronomically in the last couple of years. And just watching what goes on, I can tell you that needs to be done. And I would agree with that move 100%.
While we're on that subject, if you don't mind, I think if you go back to the MTA wage study, you'll also see that the treasurer's compensation in the middle of the range is up there. And we've talked with Ernie about this as well. I think he's comfortable with leaving his at the 2.5% like the trustees are getting, knowing full well that the next person that comes in may not have the deputy that Andrew Rickauer is trying to become. So we've got a little bit of a hybrid going on in the treasurer's compensation currently. If for some reason Andrew gets up to speed on all this treasurer stuff and then ends up in the treasurer role when Bernie leaves, that's probably a good time for us to reconsider that compensation too, because he's trying to learn all of the things that take up all the time that a treasurer's compensation is usually based on. So in the treasurer's budget, which we'll get to in a little bit, it's broken up a little bit, and maybe Andrew isn't quite getting the total difference in what the treasurer's compensation is and what he gets compensated yet, but he's still learning it too. So he's earning it at a fair hourly wage, but maybe not doing as many hours because he just hasn't been trained on it all.
And to
Yeah.
Ernie's credit, Dulcie was responsible for a lot of the stuff that, like she's not there now, so
Yep.
he's picking up the slack and Andrew's learning it, so.
Right, so, and it's possible based on that argument that just a 2.5% increase isn't adequate for the treasurer right now, but that's what he's comfortable with, if I understand you correctly.
I'm gonna get back to yours.
That was the
Well,
last page.
back to clerks.
Oh, okay.
The one thing you said, increase for hospitalization. Do we have hospitalization in the clerks?
For the clerk staff,
Assistant.
we have an
Broken
assistant
out.
clerk.
It's that position, it's a percentage.
It's a percentage.
Oh, okay, it goes
It's
that way,
allocated,
okay.
yeah. It's
Not
allocated.
for elected officials.
Okay.
Okay, if we're done with the clerk, I have to excuse myself. I have a public accuracy test at 2:00, so me and Kim will step out and be back when we're done, so.
That's when all the questions will come up.
Yeah, we'll just write them down.
Write them down, we'll be back.
So, are we ready to move on to the rest of the clerk's budget, that cost center?
The no elections for next year, so that shouldn't be an issue.
You will see the full-time salary number does go down, and that's a carryover from Lois being here for part of the year last year. She was here for a third of the year or so. So last year's wages look a little bit inflated because she was at the top of the pay scale. Kim came in at the bottom. So until she gets caught back up to where Lois was, those wages will be in our favor. And I think she's been a great addition, by the way.
Seems to.
Yep, and she's not afraid to ask Lois questions when she has them, and it's great. Lois has been great for her to work with. So, everything else in there, let's see, we had the 10% increase in the hospitalization costs. The miscellaneous line, this one will never really go away. We generally try to recommend 0 in there, but if I see something in the current year where we actually spent something in the miscellaneous line, I don't necessarily want to 0 it out until we prove the next year we didn't need it. So I'm hoping everyone's comfortable with that other argument. Otherwise, we could zero it out knowing that we might have to do a budget amendment next year if something comes up.
It's a small amount.
It is, but it hasn't always been that way across all the budgets. I know with my first budget work session, that was a pretty big discussion because the miscellaneous lines were maybe padding budgets. So,
Just have to put stuff in its right slot.
Well,
Yeah.
some of that, I know, to Randy's credit, we had so many tax tribunal costs that he did spread it around a little bit in case we had to move. And if you look at some of the budget resolutions we did, that's exactly what happened. We would take them from all these extraneous accounts because we needed, $50,000 to pay back. It was ridiculous.
yep. So nothing too serious there other than the adjustment in the clerk's compensation and then the wages and the full-time staff are reduced due to the change in staff. And the number that's in there is based on the previously approved contract for that full-time staff. All good there? All right, Board of Review. This is the first of our 3 compensated appointed groups. We have 3 appointed members on the Board of Review, and they are compensated by the meeting. They always have 3 meetings per year. And if you look at the wage study, you will see that we are significantly undercompensating our Board of Review volunteer appointees. So I recommended, even though the MTA average seems to undercompensate the chair, I recommended compensating the chair $75 per meeting and the members and alternates $70 per meeting. And the reason I recommended that is nobody will get a pay cut, and it will be able to carry that across to the Planning Commission and ZBA so that we're consistent and nobody's seeing a pay cut.
I think that's fair.
So the chair of the Board of Review, Planning Commission, and ZBA would all be compensated $75 per meeting, and then the members would be $70 per meeting. So the chair, who has the added responsibility of running the meeting, gets an extra $5 compensation per meeting. And it is a significant increase for some of them, but as a volunteer position, I don't think anyone's coming in here expecting to be compensated, but it will certainly encourage quality candidates to maybe stay when they know that they're valued.
And some of these positions, well, actually all of them, require training.
Yes,
So
they
it
do.
isn't just, meet for a little bit and go home.
Right.
Right. So the chair people and the members, 75 and 70, what about the secretaries and the
That'd be the member
alternates?
too.
Pardon me?
That'd be the member, because that's members.
No, they're paid more now. The secretaries are all paid more today.
So
More than the members.
There's-
Okay.
They're paid more than the members.
there's 2 ways to do that.
Just the planning commission.
No.
By
that's a-
moving all non-chair members to $70, everyone gets an increase. Or you can do a $5 increment and just put members at 65. So there's a $10 difference between the chair and the member and a $5 difference between the chair and the secretary. Some could arguably say
The
the
planning
secretary
commission
has
has a
more.
secretary, the zoning board has a secretary.
Yeah, but right now they're not getting anything extra.
Well, they are getting a little bit
they
more
are getting
than,
more. They're getting $5 more than a member. And the chair people are getting $10 more than a member. And so what does the average here say?
50s and 60s.
Wow. The board, so this is an interesting survey because the Board of Review chairperson is getting less than the Board
That's
of
what I
Review
said, yes.
members.
Yep.
What kind of a survey was this?
well, that's just the way it turned out for the average. If
So
you
they
look-
just took the numbers and did an average.
Yeah, the interesting thing there is Board of Review alternate low wage is higher than the Board of
Yeah.
Review member. So
Right.
But then the high wage for the chair is higher, only $5 higher than the member or alternate as well. So they're a little bit across the board. That's why I wanted to try to be consistent on all three of them.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the high end for all of them, they are far more consistent, right?
So 75, 70, and 65 would be a good place to start, because everybody would get a raise.
Well, that's true, Lynn.
75 for the chair, 65 for the secretary,
70 for the secretary,
and 65 for the members.
And that's a sizable increase that amounts to $3,000 or $4,000 on the year total.
And it's a historical, I mean, you can justify it by the position. It makes sense to have them, whatever the number is, the structure makes sense.
Okay, so if everyone's comfortable with that, I will tweak those numbers just a little bit. You will hardly see anything in the bottom line. Board of review,
3 times a year, it's hardly $100.
well, it's $10 times 2 times 3. It'll go down $30. I'm not even going to adjust that one. We'll just be $30 under budget on the expenditure side. So then the ZBA 75, secretary 70, member and alternate 65. And again, there the ZBA only meets as needed. So it might be 3 meetings a year, it might be 6, it could be 12. We don't know. Just depends on what comes up over the year. Because you don't get compensated if you don't meet.
On some boards, it gets to be complicated because the members of the committee can be prohibited by law to be the chair, and then you keep going downhill onto the committee members, and now you're going to be paying committee members who frequently don't make contributions to what goes on, getting more wage at the meeting.
But the problem with that
I know,
thought
it's
is
a very complicated
you
thing.
can't go by who's on the board now.
No.
You have to go by the job, the position. And if someone's not contributing on an evening, that's, oh well, there's nothing you can do about it, you know. It's an appointment, so.
I don't
you have to-
object to what you're doing and what you're recommending. I just want to point out that it gets a little weird.
It certainly can in unique circumstances, for sure. And in those situations, as we get better at everything we do, we need to be focusing on getting the participation from every member involved, because we have the number on each of these commissions, boards, whatever it is, for a reason. It's because you need that many people to reach the conclusion, and in a lot of cases it's the minimum required by the law that applies to that group. The board of review, you can't have less than 3, right? By law?
Yeah, it's either 3 or 6.
Yep. And 6 is just a bad idea because that can lead to a split vote, right? So if it has to be 3 or 6, 3
We
is
need
the
to look at it again. Get a 5-member board like the ZBA. 2 of the members of the board are not allowed to be the chair because one comes from the planning commission and cannot be the chair. One comes from as a board representative and cannot be the chair. And then that's all you have left to work with.
And that's actually better because now you've got the members that have to step up. somebody's gotta be the chair and somebody's gotta be the secretary.
Right.
So now you've got two members that have to be more active.
I'm not, I just think we need to look at this with time.
Yeah.
I don't object to what you're recommending, but you're gonna have to look at it with time. Because there's one where you obviously can never have two people that are gonna be on that board. Can't be just two.
Right, that's fine. They're just there to represent.
That does require those other members to step up, some,
Right.
at least one of them to
And
be
those
the
are the
chair.
appointments anyway. Those are the ones that really, those three should be doing
Well,
more.
and that puts the burden on you as the supervisor and the rest as the township
Or the
board.
appointing body.
Correct.
Right.
You
Yeah, I
you don't
agree
want to
with
just make appointments for friends and relatives for this $70 a meeting appointment and they're not going to do anything, right? Although sometimes friends and relatives might be the best option because they're the most involved. There are the whole conflicts of interest and nepotism concerns, so it doesn't always end up being that easy.
No objection.
Anyone else? Okay, as soon as I saw the discrepancy on that one between what we're compensating and what the state average is, it made sense that we make an adjustment and be consistent across the board. So 75, 70, and 65 will be the new incremental compensation amounts per meeting. And it will be the same for the Board of Review, Planning Commission, and ZBA. All right. Are we ready to move on from Board of Review? There's that adjustment, which is more than 2.5%, but it gets us to the statewide average more consistently. And that's about it. We did increase the miscellaneous line in the downward direction because we're just over $100 for the year so far. So I doubled that to $200, which is a significant reduction from the $660 that we had in the current year. Those are the changes in that cost center.
That's probably dinner, would be my guess. I'm not sure why it'd be 660.
Right, because
It's
the
awfully
previous
high.
3 years, it didn't go over 101.
Okay, but when the current year's budget was put together, there was another year on here, and that's probably where the high number was.
Oh, maybe so.
Because 1 year gets dropped off every time we go on to
Yes,
the next
yes,
budget.
okay, so maybe it was high.
And that's why you'll see me say adjusting to historical average, right? Because as things change, we try to stay in line with where the trend is going, as long as we can justify it.
Okay.
Okay, treasurer, we already talked about compensation there, and I think the treasurer is okay with only the 2.5% increase. That's not to say that he's not doing more work. It's what he's satisfied with. It's consistent with what the trustees are getting, what the supervisor's getting. And it may have to be changed in the future depending on the workload that the elected or appointed treasurer, if we were into that position, if Treasurer Johnson resigned midterm for whatever reason or before an election, then it would have to be evaluated. And I really think you either do it at the time that the appointment is made or in the annual budget process so that whatever workload that treasurer takes on is properly compensated and as consistent with the MTA wage study as possible based on the workload the elected official is taking on. I'm not hearing objections there. The remainder of that cost center, the appointed officials, which is the deputy treasurer, you'll see that we had $500 in there for this year. We've gone over that, and that's based on the hourly wage we pay Andrew. I'm increasing that knowing that he'll be doing that work for the full year next year unless there's a change somehow in the treasurer's position, because if the treasurer leaves, the new treasurer appoints their own deputy. So, and it's not to say that the township board wouldn't appoint the current deputy as the treasurer until the next election. Anything can happen there. So I do hope that we can get Andrew up to speed so that the treasurer's job goes back to what it used to be when Dulcie was our assistant treasurer.
I agree with everything that's been said. I just think that we need to really remember that this is one to look at next year closely.
But you also need to consider whether or not just a 2.5% increase is fair based on the changes we made recently. Is it adequate? Seeing what the statewide average is, if you combine the elected salary and appointed salary together, it's $13,384 in the proposed budget. That's still $4,000 under the statewide average. And we don't really know what the deputy is going to spend throughout the year based on, because it's compensated hourly.
Like I told, when you asked me, I said, I'm satisfied with that. Sure, there's more work since Dulcie. I had to learn some things I should have known before, but we're getting through it. Andrew and I are working everything through it and that, and we're working with the county on different things and that. Things are coming through that I never knew existed before. So I'm spending about 4 days a week in here. I'm in and out of here at least 4 or 5 times a week in that. So I'm in here quite a bit in that.
Yeah, I can attest. He's tried to talk to me on far more occasions than he's had the opportunity because my door's closed for whatever reason, in a meeting, whatever. But I'm not here to recommend what you compensate yourselves beyond what I feel is the right thing to do. In this case, I kind of had to go with what the treasurer felt comfortable with. It's up to you if you think it should be adjusted more. There's certainly room to do that.
Really, I'm satisfied with that.
I think they're going after this right now.
Well, that seems to be where it's leaning, and as long as the treasurer is not objecting, I would say that's okay for now. But we do need to pay attention based on who our next treasurer ends up being when it comes time. I'm not encouraging you to think about going anywhere. Just understanding that at some point that reality hits and you have to be prepared to deal with it when the time comes. Because there can be a significant amount of effort depending on the deputy that the treasurer has. Deputy and or assistant. So, okay, the remainder of that, there is slight increases to the benefits as a result of that 2.5% increase. There is the elimination of hospitalization and pension costs in there because Dulcie is no longer doing any treasury work. She is a contract assessor only. One of the things that we need to be talking about very soon is getting proper training for Andrew from somebody that has the time to do it. And Dulcie recommended this herself. As you all know, she's now a full-time assessor again for the city of Marquette. So it makes it difficult for her to just drop what she's doing and come and help Andrew when their schedules line up. It might be appropriate for a seasoned treasurer, if they're willing, to train him on all the things that he should be aware of. We have a candidate in mind. I have not reached out to her yet, but she's very experienced. If it works out, I will come back to you with a proposal to consider.
Thank you.
John, are you saying Andrew or Andrew? Andrew or Andrea?
Andrew Rickauer
Okay.
is currently the appointed deputy
All right.
by
Here
our
on the Senior
treasurer.
United Way. Probably heard his name.
See, the one thing is that for whatever reason I'm not here and he's appointed, he's also on the DDA, which means he's no longer allowed to be on the DDA. And that too.
If it comes to that point, and we'll make sure that that's addressed.
No.
We're not going to think about that for a couple of years.
You're not talking to my kids, are you?
Nope, we don't care what they think.
We care what you think.
Right.
No offense to them.
No, it's been a kind of an eye-opening in the last year and a half and that too.
Sure.
Because there are some things that are happening that I had no idea. never came to me as being treasurer or anything else, and I started asking questions, and I used the county quite a bit, and then I used some other treasurers that I know in the county, and call and ask them about different things and that, and they gave me a good idea of what's happening in that. But between Andrew and myself, we muddled our way through there. We're getting things done in that too. So
He's certainly getting up to speed because we don't see him as often as we did right when he first started. But he still has a few things that he's got to learn because we haven't really been through a full cycle yet.
Right.
So some things only happen once or twice a year. It's kind of hard to remember from one repetition. So. Okay, nothing else significant there. Assessor. Are we ready to move?
Yeah.
Okay, so wages and benefits are purely contract-based again. We have one contract employee who is considered by law an employee of the township, so we do have to cover workers' comp and that kind of thing. It is a W-2 wage, but it's by individual employment agreement. And then Janelle is still a full-time employee. She's our technical assistant from the assessing side. I think she's picked up quite a bit, but still is limited based on her experience and certification levels, just based on what she's been doing for us over the years. So what you see there for wages and benefits are contract adjustments, and otherwise the budget is status quo, but you'll still see that over current year, it is a cost savings by going to that individual employment agreement.
So the person we have a contract with is a full-time employee for the city?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting.
It is.
Does she have employees?
Yes.
That's happening more and more.
She also has deer and stuff like that.
When she left here, she had multiple individual employment agreements.
She had those when she was here.
Correct. But she gave some of those up in exchange for the full-time employment next door. And, that's beyond our control. What we can control is the performance on our contract agreement. That's it.
I have a question.
We did hear that last week.
If she's a full-time employee for the city of Marquette, is she getting hospitalization for the city?
Yes, but not here.
So we got a 10% increase on hospitalization.
For
Is that
Janelle.
That's for Janelle.
Correct. And we probably shouldn't be referring to employees by name here.
Correct.
But I think we all know who it is.
Okay.
So are we encouraging Janelle to increase her level?
She has.
She's trying to get up to speed, and she's also supposed to be documenting the additional responsibilities that she's finding she has to take on as a result of the individual agreement we have with our primary assessor. I have not been provided anything yet to consider whether or not we have to look at,
So in the future, we may get something.
It is entirely possible, and it's probably going to be fair to some level, because there is a increase in burden put on expectations of her because she's the one in the office on a daily basis.
Now, looking at the other side of that is that once you have those, is any of those responsibilities should have been in the contract already we have with this individual?
No,
It's not being fulfilled.
He's talking about Janelle.
I know.
Yeah.
But Janelle going through and laying out everything she's got to do, looking at those activities, should those activities have been, or should they be in the contract and that?
And they may be in the contract and not being done.
That's
what you're
Thank you.
saying.
I couldn't come up with the right wording.
So when that gets to that, and when the contract renewal comes up, we'll be all looking at whether or not that contract.
There's an
renewal is
annual
appropriate.
performance evaluation that the board has to do,
That's a time.
which means I'm going to have to provide you some information from all the feedback I've been getting over the course of this year, so that you can decide how you. It's going to put you in a tough spot because you're asked to do a performance evaluation on a staff member that you're not getting reports from on a regular basis, and
Yeah.
I've been dealing with on a weekly basis. So I'll have to provide you my input, and you're going to have to decide how that reflects your evaluation.
And we did hear at the last board meeting from someone who was somewhat dissatisfied. Now, whether or not that's correct or not, we have no idea. We just heard the comments, so we would probably all take.
I'll say in that situation, the assessor admitted to a typographical error. The issue was the timeliness of the response based on the current work situation. It's a remote setup for that employee. So there are challenges that we need to resolve, I believe.
And it is in the contract when the response is supposed to happen. I think.
Correct.
So anyways, we can talk about that later maybe and keep
Yep.
going here
Yeah,
before
if-
Dan comes back.
I think we can continue moving if everyone's comfortable with that.
Okay.
There really isn't any other significant changes proposed in the assessor's contract. It's fairly status quo, and their expenditures are getting to be fairly consistent. It's more a matter of how much field work they have to do after hours. So that's why you'll see a little bit of money in there for overtime compensation. And if you go back to 2019, that was one of the last years they did a lot of after-hours field assessments, and that is just based purely on when it's more appropriate based on when the commercial parts of our township are busy or not.
Okay.
It's good.
And it's not a significant amount, but I do know overtime is watched, and we do try to minimize it. Okay, elections. There's an easy one. No elections planned for 2023, so it's a zero budget. If for some reason a special election comes up, we'll have to do a budget amendment. We've done that in the past,
And usually that'd be reimbursed anyway, if it's not,
as long as it's not township driven.
yeah. So you'll see I did grab the election worker wages too, and you might remember that Randy raised these twice in the last 4 or 5 years, I think. So we're above the average in the state. So I did add it on there just for your information.
Probably get quality people that way then.
Yeah, he's real happy with his employees.
It's interesting how quickly we went from a nation that was objecting to $15 minimum wage to
Yeah.
you can't get employees for $18 in some places. So it happened almost overnight. I will say the township has set itself up to maintain a quality professional staff based on the employment agreements you have with all the staff. So that's a good thing. Buildings and grounds, we have wage and benefit adjustments per the contracts that was signed last year. The biggest changes you'll see are the inflationary adjustments to electricity and natural gas. And we're trying to be conservative there, a 10% increase on the power and 20% increase on the heat. The heat, that amounts to $500 increase. The electricity is probably the bigger one, even though it's a smaller percentage increase. And keep in mind our electrical rates here in the UP, or at least in Marquette Township, have become more stable since the coal plant went offline. Because this natural gas facility down on Wright Street is far more reactive to market demands. So if the rates coming from the grid are lower than they can produce, they turn off the plant and they buy it off the grid. If they can produce it cheaper than the price on the grid, they turn on the plant. So they're far more reactive, whereas with a coal burning plant, you can't do that with the flip of the switch. It takes hours. So it does save on the electrical rates. I do, though, see the energy crisis impacting us moving forward.
I think,
And
that's
I
pretty
think it is a
That
crisis.
one's straightforward, perfect.
Good.
Good?
Yeah?
Good. John, when they kick it on, it rattles my fireplace.
Rattles the township.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
So you know when the generator is getting fired.
It's vibrating nails out of my siding. That's something.
yeah, the earth vibrates.
Yeah?
But they fixed it, don't worry.
Yeah, I got it fixed.
Yeah, not
So the
next to-
nails are going back
not
in on
next
their
to
own.
the- yeah.
I go around and pound it. It's
Implosion.
just weird though. It's just, I could, because I got a grill on my fireplace and I know when they're kicking it on, it vibrates and at night I can hear it.
Well, those are some pretty big engines.
Yeah? I'd love to go and take a tour of that place.
You probably could.
Okay,
How about the vehicle expense though, before we leave building and grounds?
sure.
Because we still need one more vehicle, right, this year, even though we bought our 23 budgeted vehicle this year? Or was that
We got two
totally?
this year,
We
didn't
got
we?
two for,
Right.
yeah.
So
So-
one of them was for public works.
That's what I was just gonna
Water and
say.
wastewater, that was in their budget.
Okay.
The other was for building and grounds, and you'll recall, we had budgeted the $25,000 to purchase that truck from the fire department for
Mm-hmm.
building and grounds. That was a pretty big truck, much bigger than we need for our routine building and grounds maintenance. So we traded that in on that little Canyon we have.
So the extra vehicle that we need next year is for Public Works?
That would be to replace another one of the aging trucks in the company.
Okay.
But we're only putting $10,000 toward it.
For building and grounds?
That's maintenance.
Yeah.
Maintenance, vehicle maintenance.
No, vehicle
It
expense.
says vehicle expense.
It's not for replacement.
No?
It's
What's it
for maintenance.
Oh,
Well, what are repairs and maintenance for?
Yeah.
That's at 9,000.
it really should
Buildings and
say.
grounds, the vehicle expense is different from the facility expense. That's what the
Oh.
difference is.
$10,000, does that include gas?
For vehicle expense? Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yep, it's
Okay.
all the maintenance costs for the
Okay,
vehicles.
wow.
Maintenance and operating
Okay,
costs.
all right. So they're still asking for another truck?
Not building and grounds, no.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah, really? That's what-
It is
Okay, all
Public
right, we're
Works.
good, just keep going.
Yeah.
That would show up in the capital budget,
Correct, although,
a
That's
new
true.
vehicle or a replacement
yeah,
vehicle.
yeah, we need to think
This
about,
is
yeah.
operation and maintenance.
Okay,
True.
okay, we got it. We're good.
John, when do you expect that any labor of that on the new building over there, the new park over here? Are we gonna do any maintenance on that this coming year?
You didn't even get the grant yet.
No, we wouldn't have any operation and maintenance costs there until we start improving it.
Okay.
And acquiring it is the first challenge.
Right.
Yeah,
We don't even know if we're going to get it yet. So,
all right.
I mean, it's looking promising, but there's no guarantees.
We're hopeful.
Yes, hopeful.
No,
Cautiously
we are.
optimistic.
Yeah, oh, that's another nice term.
All right. General services admin. This is primarily your clerical costs in Township Hall. All right. So it includes Andrew's wages and benefits. And again, I shouldn't be using names, but that's really what it comes down to.
Your secretary or receptionist.
Correct. Yep. And then all of the various costs of operating Township Hall. So it's got your copier costs, computer costs, phones, printing and publishing, postage, any office supplies, they're all in there. And that's actually a reduced budget over prior years. And the biggest reason is the bottom line, miscellaneous tax tribunal. Randy had been budgeting $50,000 in there, and you can see in 2021 we had a big number. That big number was actually reimbursements due to tribunal settlements. We think that we're getting a better control on it. It's not to say it's ever going to end soon. I don't think it will, because they're just going to smaller and smaller boxes. It's not a big box issue. It's a
Business
It's
issue.
a tax reduction issue due to a loophole with the tax tribunal. And it's because of the members on that tax tribunal. They're being convinced by power players in the legal world to reduce commercial business taxes. And
Primarily the state chamber.
So will housing be next? Will people come and ask their taxes be reduced?
Please
based
don't
on-
let it go that way.
Don't even say that out loud.
Oh, no, but
I don't
think
even
it
know,
will
and
come.
that's a fair
Because,
comparison.
right, because that's gonna come next. People are,
It's apartments.
it's not just gonna
As
be.
long as there's a housing shortage, it's gonna be very difficult to argue that, because housing values shot through the roof in the last couple of years.
Which
It's settling
increased.
down now with interest rates, but there's still a high demand. We've got the whole Forestville project on our radar, right? We're still hearing from the developer that they have a higher demand than what prior developers had.
Yeah.
They've done their studies. It's not up to us to decide if their studies are accurate or not. They've gotten feedback from potential customers now because they put a press release out. I can tell you their numbers they think are real. What ends up being approved is going to be a result of the process to get there. We won't decide that tonight because it's got to go. The Planning Commission hasn't seen a formal application yet. They've only seen a preliminary proposal. So,
We aren't going
Oh, I
to
think Amy
decide
is.
it.
well,
Or so,
a
We're
no,
not
Freya
gonna
might
let
be.
a planned unit development ultimately, I think, does require township board
PUD
approval
comes here.
Yeah.
because it has zoning variances built into the process.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the whole idea of a residential PUD is to build homes on smaller footprints, meaning parcel size. So if you hear a 1/4 acre parcel size, if they're doing that to leave 50% of the property green space, that's cluster development. A 1/4 acre parcel is similar to a parcel in Trowbridge Park, the Village of Harvey, the City of Marquette, City of Ishpeming. It's not that small. It's just significantly smaller than Huron Woods or Blue Heron Bluffs, right? So what is the market demanding? What can the infrastructure handle? And what's appropriate for that area? That's what the Planning Commission has to figure out.
And I will say that planning commissions, I've been going to this educational in-service that we are having here, which is, I will say that there's been a change as to how people think about lot size, development, from 3 years ago to today. You know, and the whole hurricane thing in Florida, you know, people are going to start rethinking, this is going to stay green space, this is going to stay here. The planning commissions are going to look at lots of stuff than just saying, that person wants to build 50 houses in this little spot and we're all about development, so we're going to say, go. I think people are going to look at it differently. That's what I think.
We have challenges. There's no doubt about it. We have to react to what the market is demanding because that's what developers and property owners are going to bring to us. Everyone has to remember, the public especially, we didn't go out and ask Longyear for a 220 unit PUD on 163 acres. It's what they proposed to us. Now we start the process. What the outcome ends up being is going to depend on what we think the township can handle and what they are willing to develop. It could mean no project. But I will also say, if we're not very careful and put too many restrictions on them to the point they can't develop their property, that becomes a much bigger issue than having adequate infrastructure. So
it'll be interesting times in development.
there won't be a shortage of challenges to deal with. We'll see what happens. The bypass road, that's a separate issue, and I don't think it's ever going to go away based on the development pressures and the need to have that bypass route. The biggest challenge is the limited number of options available to locate it. And that's what I think the Road Commission is struggling with. And it's what you as a township board will have to deal with at some point, and it's what I have to make recommendations to you on at some point. So, anyway, that's not necessarily budget stuff, but it does impact budgets one way or another. Building and grounds, we think we're good there, right?
Right.
General services admin, that's right, we had already moved on to it, but the tax tribunal issue, we do think it's settling down some, but not going away. So I decreased it by 40%. And that's based on expenditures year to date. So far, they look like they're in our favor, but last year's numbers, 2021, was a big number. So putting 50,000 or 30,000 in there on an annual basis and spending on average about 10,000, we're doing okay. It just means we're not advancing if taxable values are reducing. So, and we all know that the Headley Amendment limits how fast you can get it back. Law enforcement contracted services, that 5215 is the new contract number. And Supervisor Durant did provide a copy of the current agreement. There's actually a little change that we need to do in here for sure, in that there's a paragraph in the services provided by the sheriff that should be moved down to the services provided by the township. And that is paragraph 4.3, Marquette Township will supply the patrol vehicle equipped for patrol and enforcement activity within the township. And you'll all recall we already started that conversation, but it also says 80,000 miles over the life of that vehicle. We need to change that to 100,000 because that's what we're getting it back. So we need to change that understanding such that we're not getting a more tired vehicle than we were expecting to get.
We don't have a contract yet, do we? A draft?
No,
Okay.
but I think we can draft it.
Okay.
So take paragraph 4.3, put it into section 5, but change the 80,000 to 100,000, all right? And then under paragraph 2, the $50.38 will change to $52.15. And that comes directly from HR at the Sheriff's Department. So you calculate that out by the 80 hours per week that's in the contract, and you add the 10,000 for upset, a nice round number of 227. Not much room for flexibility on the contract with the sheriff's office. It's up to you what you think is appropriate to contribute to upset this year. I know that's been a discussion the last couple of years.
I'm still curious to see I think we're giving a lion's share of money to upset compared to our surrounding neighbors. And I don't believe that the residents are getting lion's share of the upset process, or however you want to.
Were we getting some of
work
those
on.
numbers, Lynn?
I did invite Tim because the lieutenant, because it's either their annual report or something was September. So I haven't heard back from him. I'll get a hold of him again.
Some of the
see if he
things.
can come and see us, because he was going to bring the new updated report from last year that they have to produce.
I do believe, though, with our commercial district, there's a lot more going on than really needs to be made public, other than people should be aware of their surroundings.
Yeah.
So I don't know that your assessment is unfair. It just, without seeing some sort of numbers, it's hard to justify what the actual compensation is relative to the benefit received.
Well, and he said that. He said we can't do that because if they are out in Gwin and they make a bust, or a sale rather, and they come through town and they're heading to Ishpeming, they get busted there, but they stop here at McDonald's and buy something or whatever. You know, we've got 3 or 4 communities involved. So what they're looking at is the pot, not individual.
But if we're
municipalities.
contributing, I'll say it again, if we're contributing the lion's share to the pot, is that where we want to be? Is that where the residents want our money to be spent? And yeah, I'm sure the businesses attract a certain group of people who travel through here. But this is the east-west corridor for the UP. Of course they're going to travel through here. And of course we have a university, but is it Marquette Township residents' responsibility to pay more than anyone else?
I
That's
think
all
what
I'm
we need
asking.
to ask
We don't
of,
know that we are paying more. We're not
I
paying as
think we
much.
were paying more last year, Lynn.
No, he said that we're not. And
We paid $10,000 last year.
Oh,
Other
Ishpeming
people
paid
didn't.
like 20 or some ridiculous thing.
Well, we'll ask him.
Yeah, he needs to give
I
us
have
the
the
update.
numbers.
I don't
still.
want to argue because I don't have the data to,
Yeah, I'm just
counter either
asking,
side of the
are we paying our fair share, not more than our fair share? I'm all
How do
about
you
that.
determine what the fair share is?
Yeah.
I think that's his job.
No, I don't think that is.
And I
don't
also
think they can,
know that money comes from the federal
Touch
and
that
state
down.
government to fund some of this stuff as well.
They don't get that much money from the
they don't.
federal and the state.
He said that, they
No,
don't.
they don't.
They're going for grants.
Well, you
I'll
know
get him
what,
in
that's
here.
great. that
I'll get him
they're
in
going.
here.
Yeah, get him in here, because I have some questions.
But we probably need to put, if we're gonna be the ones putting the contract together for the sheriff, we probably need to put that on the next agenda. So
we should
make
be,
those
if
changes
it's
and put it in the
relatively
packet.
minor changes. They did agree to let us order the next vehicle as long as it meets the equipment spec they need. And I believe we have enough money earmarked to equip the SUV, which is going to be buying all new equipment because it's different than putting in a patrol car. So,
But we'll need
in or
some
on.
time for them to look at it too. So if we put it in the next agenda,
the
then
spec is pretty easy.
we can,
Oh, the
Forward
agreement,
it.
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
forward to them for November.
I can tell you the most significant change to the current agreement is moving a paragraph later into the contract because it's not a sheriff's office provided service, it's a township provided service, so it's in the wrong section that's currently written. And then the hourly rate matches what they gave us, and that's primarily it, other than the 100,000 miles instead of 80,000 miles over the course of 3 years.
Right.
And I believe a full-size SUV will have plenty of life left with 100,000 miles on it. Those things are known to go quarter of the way to 1,000,000 miles on them. So
Did Dan get all his
Next
questions answered when
Next what?
Next
Seibert
agenda.
came here, or not? Dan Everson? He did?
maybe. I think he still has some skepticism on certain things, but I can't speak for him.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, so the 10,000 is in there to match the current year. You have time to change that if you feel it's justified.
And we just give that to them, right? We write them a check for 10,000?
They invoice us for that amount, I believe,
Okay.
based on what we agreed to.
Okay, all right, because that, I'll address that again and look at that then.
Then you go out to Walmart and buy it.
Don't.
Okay, street lighting.
All right, there's an inflationary adjustment in there for electrical costs and no change to the repairs and maintenance line. You'll see that generally is a $0 item. So hopefully we won't ever have to spend that money, but it's there if we need it.
Well, but they were supposed to be,
Yeah.
the road committee's supposed to be looking at that. They had $3,000 this year to spend. And
Well,
have
I know, but
recommendations.
let's be fair. Our staff planner left a year ago, and he was the one that was on top of it. Our new staff planner is still getting up to speed on some of this stuff, so.
So are we going to move that money so they have more money next year?
It's up to the board. We can make
It goes
a
into the
motion
fund
to-
balance, you
we
know
can
it's
always
there,
move it out.
it's not being spent.
Yeah, but we'd like to, yeah. So do we have a timeline as to when these lighting, they have to work with the Board of Light and Power and?
Board of Light and Power actually does it, and what they're doing is they're adding new fixtures where we ask them to put them.
So we have to just ask them.
The reason it hasn't happened is it takes man hours to make sure that when we put it there, we're not going to have to take it down the next day because the property owners come in here and fill the room and say, we never wanted it in the first place.
Oh, yeah, but we have an
Because that's what's
ordinance
happened in the
about that.
past,
Yeah.
prior to my time here.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, we'll be looking for the report that was going to be prepared to tell us exactly where all the street lighting that we have asked for has been installed.
I like street lighting, I have to tell you, it's very comforting to have those lights on when you're walking in the evening and the kids are still out and the time changes and,
If I told you you need 200 lights, you'd fall off your chair.
no, I
All
think it's
depending on what
sorry.
the ordinance is, and because of the density of our streets are being so dark, we should have one in the center of them and one in the end. We've got walkways that are kind of dark, and Eric got the map we made a year ago where all the lights are and where we planned on putting them in. So there's a lot of lights that should be. We're not even in compliance with our ordinance right now. So how many lights do you want to? How much money do you want to spend? So, but this coming year, I think you'd be surprised what you should be doing.
Well, we can move that 3,000 from this year over and add it to here.
But, yeah, and then just,
It's $15 and some odd cents every light
Per month.
per month.
so 15
operate
times 12 is,
It really would be good to know where they all are.
Yeah, we got a map of them.
Yes, yeah, I'd like
you
to see
oughta-
that.
oughta publish it.
Yeah.
we can ask Eric to give that to the board, right?
I'll talk to him about it.
Yeah, the road
Yeah.
committee's supposed to make a recommendation to
Yeah,
the board.
because even along these nice walkways that we're making, the one on whatever street that is, Warner, right? I mean, are there lights along there so people can walk at night?
Some do.
So let's keep in mind,
It gets dark
initially,
early.
the lights that were installed in Trowbridge were to signify intersections,
Yeah.
vertical or horizontal curves, that type of thing. The ordinance has not been fulfilled. And the challenge has been fighting the opinion of the people impacted when you put a light in front of their home. So you have to decide, do you want to enforce your ordinance or do you want to and deal with the repercussions of the people that didn't want a light in front of their house because it shines in their window where it never did before? I'm only telling you what
I know.
what
Or
historically
we
has
need
happened.
to change
That's
the
not what I
ordinance.
witnessed.
That's what we
Yeah.
need to see.
Yeah.
We need to see on the map where the lights are, where the ordinance says they should be, and which residents say,
Okay,
So we
so
have a
that
frame of
that
reference.
takes a lot of time because we're going to have to send out mailers, and how many people are going to even respond?
So I have a question about lighting. Can lights go on and stay on and then go dark at like midnight?
I don't think it's.
It's on or off based
Yeah.
on how dark it is
But
outside.
now the new shields,
Oh.
they have.
Without paying an added cost, you could put a timer on it, but that's an added cost.
So solar energy, solar lights could go on and they go off at a certain time?
Well, that's a
You probably
question for
have to
somebody
pay for the
at
timer.
BLP, not for me.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because my solar lights go off. after.
Well, sure, the battery only holds so much
Yep.
juice.
It's, I just want to make a comment. In other communities where I have served, there was always one segment of the population wanted street lighting, and another segment of the population in the same community would rather not have street lighting because they couldn't get the view of the sky that they wanted. Those communities adopted a method of having street lighting districts. So a community segment of the population that wanted to have street lighting became a street lighting district, and they paid a tax for it. That's different than the way we operate. We operate on any street light that's installed is paid for by the township as a whole. Somebody out in a community in the boondocks is helping pay for that street light. And other people who have put in street lighting by putting driveway lighting on their drive, not too close to the highway or the road, but they maintain it back on the property that they own. They've done really well by having the lighting that you're sinking. It really helps.
And some of
I
our-
think we need to look at this over the long haul, because I don't think that it's quite fair to have the rest of the district pay for street lighting that's in basically going into one. That's not quite fair.
And I think some of it happened, John, because they were bus stops and there was no lighting. And so for the safety of the students, they needed to be lit. So,
I have no problem with putting street lighting in for safety.
yeah. And that's really why they were at those intersections. And it has nothing to do
The
with
intersections and all over, that was where they belong.
Well, we have to find out, when we talk to Roger, ask him, can a resident say, I don't want the light where it should be on the corner of his house? It's a safety factor, it's not nothing else, but now with the new shields they have, before it was just a big globe that shined all over. Now they got, even if you know, some of them are flat and they go down.
They're downcast, they're more dark sky.
So now they're taking that into consideration and having them that way.
Well, ultimately, I think I could guess what the legal response will be. Are you compliant with your ordinance? And the answer is no.
correct.
And the reason is politics.
So
Squeaky wheels get the grease.
Yeah.
we have to decide if we're willing to take the heat for
Yeah,
putting it.
and if
or
you're
change the
willing to
ordinance.
take the heat, then enforce the ordinance. If
Yeah.
you're not, maybe we should change the ordinance.
Yeah, don't make it so difficult to enforce.
Well, there really isn't any enforcement right now. That's
That's another issue. Okay.
That all comes down to resources. Do you have the staff to do it? I mean, we kind of hit it in spurts based on the staff we have available
You know,
and the
there's so
skill,
much.
having the right skill set. So, okay.
Great times.
Street signs, same thing,
So,
right?
do you want to do something different with the repairs and maintenance line?
No.
Not now. We don't have enough information.
Okay. Street signs, I'm not proposing any change there. So far, we haven't bought any this year, but back in 2020, we bought a bunch, and we used up almost the entire budget that year. So it's entirely possible that next year we will need to, since we didn't buy any yet this year. That's not to say Andy's not going to come to me tomorrow and say,
Someone stole the street signs.
no, he had a list that I didn't know about, whatever, you know. So not proposing any plan there. I think it's probably a pretty good number. It's relatively low, and it is keeping them visible enough and replaced in a timely manner. Are we ready to move to planning?
Yes.
Okay, so the top lines there, appointed officials, that's your planning commission. We talked about that already. I think we're good there. Full-time is contract related for 2 employees, right? And then all the benefits all the way down to workers' comp. So then supplies, you can see we're actually low currently, but historically we've been as high as 8,500. So average of 5,000 is probably pretty good. We've been trending down. I'm not ready to trend down on next year's budget yet, because there are occasional years where they have expenses that they need to squeeze into their budget. Keep in mind, there's things that Jason will purchase out of his budget that eventually gets reimbursed by a grant, right? So that's kind of a good way to cover it without having to do a budget amendment right away. Attorney services, I did adjust that to the historical average. You'll see we did have in 2020 a $15,000 a year. We project or budgeted 15 this year, but I've only spent about 4 of it. So I reduced that by 1/3. The remainder of the budget, other than repairs and maintenance, is pretty status quo. I just adjusted that repairs and maintenance to a little bit above the prior year we actually spent any money in that budget. So fairly status quo again. Any questions there?
No.
I did review it with Jason. He seemed comfortable with it, so hopefully that will turn out to be okay. ZBA, this is showing $1,000 increase in that budget, but we're still under 2,500 total. So relatively minor impact on the general fund budget as a whole, and the majority of their expenses are compensation related with a little bit of printing and publishing.
Yeah. No.
Okay?
Okay.
Recreation, that's representing the 3 employees as opposed to the 2 that we were down to for a couple of the prior years. And it's only a portion of the wages for those 3 employees because the remainder comes from building and grounds. So only a slight increase in the overall budget. We have adjusted to the repairs and maintenance line, the sewer usage line to match historical averages, and really it's going to depend on how we actually keep the bathrooms in the farming house open. Andrew is going to start the protection to the walls and fixtures in that building soon. So it could be that that number does come back up to what we had budgeted this year, but so far we're well below our average. Hopefully we'll end up being okay there. That is a little bit of a question mark though. We do have the inflationary adjustments for electricity and natural gas. I just feel like we need to be ready for that. Contracted services, I just rounded that one up, so it covers for any inflationary adjustments. Otherwise, it's all staff related, so not much more we can do there. That's a pretty lean budget.
Sure.
Okay, insurance and bonds. There is an inflationary adjustment shown there. It is possible that we could get a competitive price if we changed carriers, providers, whatever. But this should be a conservative number to get us through next year. Any questions there?
No.
Okay, capital. This is one that I would have expected the majority of the conversation to land on, but it's hard to say. Computer equipment, I did put 5,000 in there just because we always seem to have some sort of IT project come up. It could be for anything that comes up, whether we decide to do streaming services in the community room. That won't cover it, but it'll be a start. I'm thinking we probably need to plan on that type of investment on an annual basis going forward. At some point we need to think about getting computer replacements more on a cycle so we're not replacing them all in the same year. It might be a little tough to do because a lot of times corporations that are far greater in size than us dictate to us that it's time to replace them because none of them can be upgraded, right? That's what happened with the last one. Microsoft Windows was no longer going to be supported, so we had to upgrade all of our computers for security reasons. Building and grounds. This is the one that I think we need to talk about or spend the most time discussing because we put an item in here that's not in the CIP. That $30,000 window replacement for this building. We're losing a lot of heat, and if power and heat bills are where we're seeing our greatest increases coming in the future, we need to do something about that. These windows, while they look really nice, are very inefficient. The frames are hollow core aluminum with no insulation in them. Andrew has found replacement windows that are vinyl framed that don't have a hollow core, so it's a solid frame that eliminates that big pocket of air where you have the heat transfer loss. We're talking $30,000. The rate of return on that, I wouldn't be able to guess without doing a study that takes more time than I have available at the moment. Is it worth $30,000? I think that's really dependent on what kind of winters we have the next several years.
How many windows, John?
I don't have the total count.
And which rooms are they?
It would be everything, I think, but the 2 foyers, the one on the community side and the main entrance here.
Just in this building.
Correct, just this building. Public Works is done now. They already did that in their O&M budget this year.
So do we have to put this out on bids?
It would be a good idea, but if we put it out on bids, they're gonna install it and that price goes up.
Yeah,
This price is Andrew going to places like Menards to get their commercial grade windows and he'll install them himself.
So you don't want to hear my take on all the Menards windows and doors, but certainly up to this board. I think windows are one of the most important things in your building, and you want to make sure they're high quality. Because look we already bought ones that obviously weren't, and what is it, 15 years and we're replacing them?
I don't think it's 15
No.
years either.
It's less
That-
than 15 years?
That is one of the drawbacks of a
7,
design
6.
build type project in that you can get windows that look great. They're high quality, but may not be very energy efficient.
Correct. So you want your energy efficient numbers to be up there, and
Randy, how old is?
8
years
years old.
so windows replaced in your homes in 8 years, would you be doing that?
no.
No,
No.
but come in this building in the wintertime and feel what
It's
it's like
cold.
sitting,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you can form ice cubes on the windowsills.
And it has nothing to do with most of us that are sitting here, but, you know, that whole purchasing and buying and being sold.
The board
Yeah.
wasn't consulted either, so.
Yeah, so, you know, unfortunately, this is costing our residents, there's a cost for this.
It's either you're going to continue to pay the energy loss,
Right.
or you're going to do the most efficient thing you can in eliminating as much of the energy loss as
And
possible.
we're better off to spend more money than less money to last longer and be of higher quality. So, you know, Andrew can bring you the stuff, but I would like to see what's coming, because I would like to
So,
look
the
at it.
question is, do you think this is an important enough investment to keep in the CIP for next year? If you approve the budget, nobody's going buying windows without you hearing about it again. I think we've proven that. Our intention is to come back to you with the best information possible to make the best decision on behalf of constituents, right? And if he came back with what he thinks is a really good window from Menards and we compare it to other windows from the window store or wherever and it ends up still being the best price, maybe you'll say, yeah, good job, Andrew. Or maybe you'll say, no, we think this one's better for whatever reason and we pay more, whatever the decision is. This is just a big enough item that we don't want to move on from the budget discussion without figuring out if it should stay in there or not.
And it isn't even just the heat, it's the electricity in the summer, because the sidebar to this on my list is the HVAC setup and the heat controls and the air conditioning controls, because we have offices that are ice cold, we've got the air cranked down, and the staff is running heaters because they're freezing.
That's
So
not
it isn't
the-
even just the windows.
Right.
It's the electricity cost that's that much higher besides. So even a higher investment than 30 is not a bad idea, because it's the electricity side. Besides,
whole
it's not just the
system.
gas. If
Yeah.
you're looking at
I-
20% increase.
I agree. I think the numbers should be left in, and let's wait till we hear more. That's all.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go in, just leave it
Yeah,
there.
just let it there and let it ride.
I do believe we're very blessed with talented staff able to replace these windows on his own with a little bit of help. So we could see a significant cost savings by purchasing the windows ourselves. We're just going to be limited on the sources to purchase them since we're not an affiliated contractor with whoever, you know.
So I can tell you, we bought our windows and my husband installed them, and they didn't come from Menards. So you can buy windows from, you know, if you say to Andrew, you can go anywhere, maybe maybe he will go to other spots.
He's probably trying to get the best deal on the windows that he can by going to Menards. Is it the best decision for the township? That's what we have to figure out. I give him credit, he's
Yeah.
very resourceful.
Yep, so I will say that the planning commission did support the plotter scanner for 15,000, just so you know that they were supportive of that. And that price is shared by 3 departments.
It would be planning, which is general fund, and water and wastewater.
So we have a
Three-way split.
paperweight sitting in the other room that's not being used.
Yep.
So I'm sure the new one's smaller.
But
That's better.
I'll tell you, it's a little bit frustrating right now because we bought a brand new computer to run that system, and half of the machine doesn't run on the new Windows operating system, and there's no patch for it.
Yep.
It works perfectly fine, but we have to run one half the machine on the new computer, and the other half of the machine on the old computer. So if you're scanning, you have one computer on there. If you're plotting, you have a different computer on there. And it's all because there's no security patch for this electronic piece of equipment that needs to be connected to the server. But because it doesn't have the security patch, we can't connect it to the server, so we have to use the old computer that's not on the server.
Yeah, and I think the fire department was saying they would use it too.
They certainly can and will, because
Yeah.
certain plan sheets need to be printed full
Right.
scale.
So, yeah, just so you know that the planning commission supports.
I'm guessing they're not anxious to pay their share of it, though.
No one's anxious to pay, but if you have to hire out, which means you have to bring your stuff somewhere else to print,
It would be
you're
the builder's
paying
exchange.
anyway, so we're probably less expensive for them.
It's really hard to say. It depends on how quickly the new equipment doesn't have a security patch for the new Windows operating system.
Hope it's not coming on train.
So before we leave that category, I want to make sure that we've got some money to evaluate the HVAC. I keep saying it, but I want to make sure it's either in the G&A, repair and maintenance, or it's considered capital or something. We need an evaluation of this whole building.
My suggestion would be to put it in capital, because if they come and evaluate it, they are likely going to have to install dampers in the various ducts going into each of the offices to balance it.
Or
I
zones.
think in the zones, yeah.
So this building wasn't built with zones in the major offices, it was just one big room, so.
So where and how much do we put in here then?
It would be in building and grounds,
Okay,
and my recommendation would be, if you're going to cover the cost of getting the balancing done, you probably better put about 10 grand in
I was
there.
going to say 10.
And if we get the pricing from a couple of contractors early in the year, and it comes in at 20 to do the work, now you know you probably can't do all the windows right away. That can wait another year. But,
But you can start.
yeah,
Okay.
10,000 isn't a lot of money.
if you want to increase 45 to 55 and add 10 grand in for the mass balancing of Township Hall, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. You know, the board hasn't seen the capital improvement plan yet. We haven't, the planning commission just, did you approve it? Have you looked at it? Or you weren't
Well,
there?
we saw pieces of it. It's, yeah, we did.
It's got to be part of this.
Yeah.
So whatever we need to do to,
I think when they come, when your departments come, they'll talk about their proposals, wouldn't you think?
They will tell you what's in their CIP request for the year for sure.
Yeah.
That being said, the CIP should come to the board as a whole.
it has to be
So
part
if
of
you
this
say
process.
you saw pieces of it, we need to make sure that whatever comes to the township board is the whole thing.
I think we saw old pieces because some things were purchased the first time we got it, and then we saw different pieces of it. So, you know, that whole plan, maybe when we meet with the planning commission, we can actually talk about how this needs to work and who's responsible for what. So we're not the only
'Cause
group
the
that
Windows-
struggles with CIP. Windows should
The
certainly have
windows
come
weren't in
there.
there yet, right?
Yeah.
Because John said that. He's going to
So
add
I
it
think we'll
afterward.
just keep working on making this a better process for us,
Yep.
not us.
We
all
need
of
to
us.
get all of the new staff in Township Hall back up and running as efficient as we were before 4 staff members left in a matter of 2 years.
And COVID too. So everything
Yeah,
else.
COVID made it
That didn't
crazy.
help. We lost a couple of years of efficiency for sure.
Okay, so we got a vehicle, we're after 3 o'clock, so we got to push it a little bit here to finish, or not.
We're getting close on the general fund though. Yep, there's that annual allotment for the police vehicle, and we think, based on the analysis we did going back 2 purchases ago, that this allotment will allow us to order and pay for that SUV for the sheriff's department, which won't arrive until 2024. Or it won't be, it will be a 2024 model, so it would be built after June or July of next year. We just don't know when we'll get ours. Okay? And then the wheelchair swing was in this year's budget, but we only had 5,000 in the budget, and our vendor said you need 50 to build it right, because you have to do the site improvements around it. So, that's what we put back in there. If we're going to continue forward with that, we have to decide, is it going to go at Lions Field, or is it going to go up here? So if it's going up here, we need to make sure we have the property first. It might make sense to have it at Lions Field, you just have to figure out where it goes on the property.
Yeah, and it'll take up some of the property that's currently used for something else. Whatever that something
Well,
else is.
there's some green space areas over there.
Yeah, and we like green space.
It wouldn't take up a ton.
Yeah.
But that Lions Field is getting full enough, I would say.
And this 50,000 is coming out of the recreation millage, or is this the general fund?
It's coming out of the general
CIP.
fund, but, okay. Let's go back to revenues, line 1. Taxes. That line is general operating millage, roads, police, and recreation. But the recreation millage is now expired, going into 2023. So all of that money was going into the general fund under one tax line. I can't give you a breakdown of how much money we generated over the 2 years of that rec millage, but we can get it to you. Within, maybe by the meeting next week.
And did we already spend some of that recreational?
Well, yeah, it's covering
Yeah.
our operating costs.
Yeah,
Yeah, and didn't it cover some baseball stuff?
No.
Lawnmowers,
Lawnmowers, covered lawnmowers. Okay.
Yep.
So we've spent some of what we've gotten.
we've spent probably half of the 2 years worth of the millage.
because a lot of that was payroll. That was the idea.
It was payroll?
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
to pay for the,
the argument was
people
made
could do
to
it.
return our staffing to what it had been before.
Oh, okay. So
we had to
we've
transfer to
spent,
Public Works.
well, then we maybe spent a lot of it.
he said about half,
I think it's about half.
somewhere
Yeah,
in there.
so
That
you'll
was
be
the
able to
projection
tell
I
us
did
that.
2 years ago,
Okay.
after we saw what it was generating and what it was going to cost to continue operating Parks and Rec.
Well, I guess if I think about this, if you want a wheelchair swing, it might be better off to put it in the new park, because then we can build it into the budget with the new park, and you can maybe look at an all-inclusive kind of play area up there versus what's already there at the other park. Because it's
a
not
great idea.
all-inclusive,
Is
it's
that
not
what the
all-inclusive
township board
there.
agrees to?
I mean, you can mirror what the city's doing downtown, or you can create something totally different, but have it be all-inclusive. Yeah.
And there's got to be some grants or something available. This is a huge expense.
It's a.
You talk about
yes.
covering the whole township, I mean, nothing against the idea, but that's a huge amount of money for all the taxpayers to pay.
I agree.
For
But
how
maybe,
few
yeah,
people?
maybe we can figure it in with the new park
I think
area.
it's a little premature right now to have it
I
in the
think if you're gonna
budget.
do it, you do it at Alliance Field, and then in years to come, do it on the other one. Because I think you're getting more use out of the Lions Field than you will the other ones.
Yeah, but we don't have $50,000 to,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're thinking that way.
I think it's premature to have it in this budget right now, when we don't have a plan for what we're gonna do. Go ahead, Ernie.
We can also watch what's happening up in the Ishpeming that the Kiwanis is doing up there on that playground they're building. They're putting in a wheelchair swing up there, and they're got 55,000 allocated for that. So because it's not a small expense, it's a major expense to get it all laid out to do it because of the wheelchair accessibility in that. Because I've seen a couple of them, and they are big in that. So it's quite a bit in that. When you see kids who can't get on the swings, you can't do anything else in that, sure, it's a lot of money, but it's something for them that they can actually do. My one concern is that if we do that, we're going to have security cameras all over the place, because there's going to be something that's going to generate interest at night and weekends and that, so when no one's around. So that's another sidebar we have to be concerned with in that too. So, and it's not something you can do overnight. It's a year or 2 year project to do it, because if you look at the way they're laid out, it's a major undertaking in that, and it's not just 30 feet. You're talking lots of area to laying it out in that too. So.
I would say maybe put that off for another year.
At least, yeah.
So I take that out, John.
Okay.
We don't have a plan for it. I mean, just because it's.
Take that out.
I think we need to start looking at it, what's all involved in that. Because I showed you some pictures
Yeah,
up in
so-
Minnesota.
Keep in mind, to do it right, we're gonna have to hire a prime consultant to do the site work
Yes.
design. And then the wheelchair swing design is gonna come from a manufacturer that we choose. There's one that has a rep in the UP, and that's who we talked to that gave us the $50,000 number. So,
So if we want to talk about this seriously next year and figure out where, that's different, and we can plan it for '24. But
I'm
we don't,
okay
we
with
don't have
that.
a
The
plan.
reason it came back is because we had it in last year's budget, just we were missing a zero at the end of the number we had put in there, so.
And I've been pushing it too. So.
And the treasurer's been pushing it.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea, I'm just saying that
But I
we're
think,
not ready.
watch the
Budget.
playground in Ishpeming as they develop that. There's going to be one there. So we'll have a good idea of what it looks like and what's involved within that too. So it gives us a,
Maybe we have them come and talk to us when. the
once
time-
they get to
it's
that
done.
point, yes.
Yeah.
and then the all-inclusive playground zone in the, where the old cinder pond is, that's gonna be where you're gonna be able to see what's really
Yeah.
going
I
on.
don't know
That
what's
should
going
open
in
in
there.
the spring. I don't think it's so, this is for you and this is for you. I think this is for everyone, so it's inclusive.
I mean, I don't know what equipment they're putting into it at this point. in time.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a plan online.
They're taking a wooden one out.
Yeah, they are taking the wooden one out. Maybe we could get that.
That one's being funded completely through donations to the best
Yes.
of my knowledge.
Yeah, need it, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe we look at that or grants or something when the time comes.
Yep. Okay,
Debt service?
so we added 10,000 and eliminated 50. That's actually,
That's good budgeting.
Yeah.
there you go. It makes my job easier. So the debt service, we don't have a choice on that. Those are all coming from the amortization schedules. We have to pay those debt payments. That being said, there is that solid waste fund loan that the general fund has taken out in increments over the years.
Yeah, if we get this then in the book, we can talk
Yep.
about it.
Well, it's not in there.
That's
That's
what I
not
said.
on the chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already talked to her about it.
Okay.
The debt
Yeah.
sheet.
So
It needs to
we believe if we paid off that interfund loan, we would still have approximately 8 months worth of operating costs in the fund balance.
And we're planning on 4 months.
I think it's 4, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it should be a minimum of 6 personally, but
Yeah.
that's not my decision.
I think 6 is good.
Yeah.
I have no
Your
problem.
revenue stream comes
Twice a year.
annually, really.
Yeah.
No, the second tax collection is is nothing is kept for ourselves other than the admin fees, but that's when the money comes and goes.
Right.
So,
I think 6 months is good
Yep.
for the general.
Even what we get in December. All I said, I come in one hand and it goes out the other hand and I don't have much in the middle. That's, we keep.
right,
That's what it amounts to.
So you had told me, John, that it was, that interfund loan for solid waste was $158 and
Yeah.
$80 or something.
and that's, you'll see
That's
that in the
nothing.
financial statements, it's there.
It's good. That's,
I do believe that that's one that the general fund should take care of. We also have that outstanding loan from the general fund to the fire fund that we did until the fire department gets their next one or two, I think it is now, equipment millage payments.
Yeah.
And that was to save on the price increases of that fire truck.
So can we see when we get the fund that Lynn's talking about, the debt service, can we see when those loans are paid off?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what that shows.
Oh, that's what that shows?
Yeah, you can look at it.
Yeah,
And it'll
because
show you
people
the
ask me
smallest
that.
ones, it'll show you the smallest ones, which makes sense to pay off, kind of, sort of that debt snowball argument, right, like Dave Ramsey. There's one in the water fund, I think, that the balance is about 50,000. Talk to Lenny, talking about paying that one off as quickly as possible, probably year end.
the other thing we have to look at is the balloon on these buildings in '24.
Yeah.
So
Is it
that's,
24 or 23? We gotta figure that out too.
my paperwork says 24.
Okay. What is on that? Is that what it said on that list, 24? Either way, that time's gonna go by really quick,
Yeah.
especially if we
And
need
what
to
are we
talk
gonna
to
do?
RD about
Yeah.
refinancing.
If interest is already 7% now, I mean,
Yeah, you know that.
we had a nice low rate before. We
But
gotta figure out
on
what
all
we're
our
gonna do.
debts, I'm going back and trying to visualize, showing out where we're at in each one and when they're due. The ones that are being paid off, we're taking the dollars that we're putting towards that, if it's possible, and putting it on another one to decrease the number of years that we're paying on them. And that, to try and get out of debt as fast as possible.
I know that's what the board said. I don't know that that's what's been happening.
Yeah,
So we're taking a closer look at it now.
Okay.
And if we start with the easy ones by paying off the interfund loans so that we can start cracking down on these externally funded loans, I think it makes sense because the very first year is easy. Solid waste fund gets paid off. That allows you to decide if you do anything with the garbage fees for the customers. Because the fund balance is back to healthy because there's no debt owed to it.
And we need to talk to the solid waste people to find out why we need all this money.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a note.
Yeah. Because if we don't need that there, why would we continue to get that from?
But I think going back what Pete said is, stay status quo. Because we don't know what the future's gonna bring at this point in time. And that, leave the rates as is rather than
Reduce.
redoing them and that at this point in
I
time.
would strongly discourage considering rate reductions because then the increases have to be that much greater.
Right.
But knowing that amount's gonna be reimbursed, we shouldn't, if there's expected increase, we should be able to hold it.
Yeah, we know that
Not increase it.
our cost of living adjustment from our waste hauler is going to probably be pretty high next year due to inflationary numbers. We know the tipping fees are going up $2 a ton every July,
Right.
and I don't see that ending anytime soon.
Yeah, it was
So-
5 or 6 years.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what they said.
Right, right.
It's on paper, but that's as far as
Yeah.
it
They're
goes.
they're an interesting group.
Yeah, they are.
So,
They've certainly grown up there in what they do. There's no doubt
They
about
have,
that.
yeah.
And now they're talking about a PFAS wastewater plant.
yeah,
So-
so they're they're a business.
Well,
They're a business.
not legally, they're an authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
But yes,
So anyways, all these are,
I don't think you
Okay.
have much flexibility unless you plan
Pay 'em off.
to increase principal payments, which is kind of what we just talked about, right? So the solid waste fund debt, we're talking about paying that off instead of in $5,000 annual increments. So that one will then disappear after a few years because it's got to stay in there by the Uniform Chart of Accounts requirements for, I forget what it is, 3 or 5 years after the current budget year, or after that budget year is passed. So the next segment is transfers out, and you'll see that that number is up a bit this year. And that's because we're proposing to fund road maintenance to the tune of $75,000 instead of $50,000. And you'll remember we didn't do anything this year when we lost our staff planner because we didn't have a priority list for the roads committee to recommend coming into this year. We do have one for next year. And I think that project list will exceed $75,000. So we'll bid it out, see where it comes out, and then make a recommendation that's within the budget. And if you want to jump to public improvements, we could probably knock that one out pretty quick, or we can do appropriations, which may take more time.
Well, let's just keep with the general fund.
Okay,
Yeah,
community promotions,
we're already half hour over.
our favorite subject. I didn't recommend any changes to the $12,500 for events, because that's what the budget has been as long as I've been here. It's completely up to you what you think that number should be. $5,000 for beautification, which we have not really spent in most years, and then $6,000 for facilities.
What does that mean?
6,000 is that facilities. I typed it in there.
So tell me what beautification means.
I'll tell you what that is.
Okay.
Facilities. Facilities is anything that comes up, whether it's recreation. The first year I was here, Randy used money out of community promotions to put up more high netting around the ice rink. We still have one side that does not have it. That's because pucks were flying into the neighbors' yards. So we extended the netting above the top of the fencing. And that's catching the pucks now. We still have one more side, and if Andy does it by buying the materials himself, it'll be less than $6,000. But that $6,000 leaves that line item where it's been historically. I think we need to go back to beautification and events, but it's up to you which parts of this.
So wouldn't it make more sense to put that 6,000 if it, does it really make sense to put it in community promotion? It does not. Move that 6,000 to recreation or something.
We can put it wherever you want.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
Someone's
So
going to say
the
to
issue
me,
is-
what are you doing?
The issue is, will next year's reactive maintenance item be at Lions Field? Will it be at Township Hall? Will it be planting a new Christmas tree?
Well, then it
It's
should
not
be.
community
It's a
promotion.
placeholder is what it is.
It's not
We can put
community-
it wherever you want, or we can eliminate it.
Well, let me kind of, I guess maybe we need to think about it and come back to it, but,
I didn't even expect that to be the conversation because
well,
it
we're
never
not,
has
we haven't
been.
gotten to the rest of it yet.
We need to get some
Yeah,
ideas
we
as
can-
to what
we can talk about
what
that.
we're going to use for it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah,
If
'cause-
you want to make it 0, we can do that, and then when the issue comes up, we address it with the budget amendment. That's fine.
No, leave it in there.
No, we want to leave it in there.
well,
I need a consensus.
You-
That's why we do
I
this
like-
Let's
process.
skip it for now. We're
Leave
going
it
to
for
skip it
now.
for now.
Leave it.
Just leave it.
Okay?
okay, now, beautification,
Yep.
That's probably flowers, I'm guessing.
That's the budget
I
for
never
around the
get that much
signs.
to plant.
Yeah.
But I also think
Well, there's 6 signs.
over time, that could be part of covering the expense for the corridor plantings if we go beyond the pilot project. Remember, that seed is $1,000 an acre. You can do 5 acres with that money. Or you do 4 acres and $1,000 worth of plantings around the
Turn that down a
signs.
week now.
Yeah.
Well, and probably the two the signs may need to be replaced. And Mary Beals is telling me the sign over on Grove Street, they moved it or
Yeah, they had to move it.
they had to move it, so
They'll put it back.
Because of
they're not
tree
putting it
silence.
back
It's right
where.
by the road.
Yeah, it's not going back where it was.
No, it's going to have to come closer
Yeah.
to the line.
Yeah, but, Yeah, beautification, 5,000, yeah, so it's flowers. Sort of.
That's historically
Can it
what
be
it's been,
signs?
but
The signs could get fixed.
See, that's community promotion. in my
Well,
mind.
that's beautification.
okay,
Yeah,
but
it is.
it can come out of that 5,000 for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's really up to the township board how that money gets spent.
So we've got 11,000 in there, we can do some of that. I mean, we had the signs painted this year, stained for free. But Lenny's got the list of all of them, he's got all the pictures, and he knows, he said one or two might have to be replaced. They're not even repairable.
Well, and they're not
So if we
flower
leave
planters.
11,000 in there, that's,
Okay, all right.
How about in the notes section, that 6,000 for facilities, I'd change it to signs, township signs.
okay?
Would you feel more comfortable with that?
You can put anything you want. If we have to change it, we change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go buy some more flower bulbs. Well, that'll be $25.
I think we can cover that.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, just so you guys know, that the nice people at Midas allowed us to put hoses there this year so we could water the flower bed there, so it didn't dry up. So it still looks very, very nice, and the Lenny helped me get the hoses there, and Barry helped, and yeah, so I think, I might buy them donuts.
Well, and I think, and I've been meaning to go up there and stop and knock on the door, I think the one on the west end is being done by the Heritage House people, because it looks awesome. They even
Or
painted
did
it,
we do it?
or stained it.
Or did Parks and Rec do it? Because one
We
time.
didn't do it this year,
Oh,
or last
okay.
year, no.
Because Parks and Rec did it one time.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
We have some pretty talented staff on that side too. I mean,
yeah.
They might have done it and not
They-
said.
Amanda and Nicole are
I think,
getting.
I think Amanda did it once, but yeah, otherwise,
Maybe
anyways.
it's to ask them for their thoughts. What can be done to improve it and that, and what they like to see.
Well, it's under Lenny's people.
Yeah.
Okay, under Lenny or whoever does it, but
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
if you get them involved to give us some ideas, we're moving forward.
Anyways, okay.
Okay.
So now we go to
So we're
the
leaving the 11
controversial
there.
one.
I think the events discussion, and John and I talked about this morning, needs to happen at this work session, and we're already over time. So we need, probably for the next, at the next board meeting, we either need to schedule another work session to finish the general fund and maybe the fire department, or we just have a conversation about the events, because it's getting more involved. We've gone around and around and around, how much we want to spend, who's going to take care of them, what happens with the tree, do we need to, have the stage, and, are they going to take the car show? We need to have a conversation about events, because I'm sick of hearing about it.
Well, and we have businesses in the community that are offering to help us, but do we want to accept their assistance if they are an adult-oriented business for a family-friendly event?
So I'll ask this.
And should Todd be getting, or the radio station be getting donations for the township? Because this is.
There's a lot of things
it's gotta
to
stop.
discuss.
The
It's gotta
committee
stop.
itself needs a little more organization for sure, because I feel like this is where I have the most potential to get myself in trouble, because of things that I may not have as much control over as I feel I could have.
Okay, so I'll ask this one question. So the 4th of July, we give them $1,000, right? We give it to them with no strings attached.
Correct.
So, in my mind, something to think about till the next time. I'm going to run the car show. Give me $2,000. I'll spend it how I want. Done. Township is out of it. All we are is a sponsor. Done.
That would
Done.
be the easiest thing.
And yeah, and I did registration for the car show. It is not Market Township residents at the car show. Just
Well, we
just
have 2 more events we have
Yeah.
to figure out what to
Yeah.
do with.
Well,
and how to
I
run them.
say, and the business association, what are they called?
Yeah, Township Business Association.
If I was them, I'd be saying, I'll do it, because it's about me. It's about the businesses on 41, except maybe the little event at Lions Park. Oh, it's not called Lions Park, is it?
Linesfield.
Yeah, it was Lions Park when I was a kid. But, there's a lot of people there that aren't from the township too. It's a community event. So,
So however, we'll talk about it at the next,
Can we do that? Can we just
The
give
next-
money to can we just give money to a group? As a township?
sort of.
Sort of.
As long as our residents there's a benefit for our
Benefit,
residents. That's the key.
Okay, well,
So we're
okay,
gonna
then
have-
you'd be out of it all in there. It's not a real committee, right? It's not like a committee that we have to have.
It wouldn't be anymore.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't need me involved in those meetings anymore.
And you wouldn't need us unless we chose to volunteer to help involve. And
There's some potential of the events fading as a result because the township doesn't have as much involvement, but I think it would address some of the concerns we've had.
And there's a chance of the events growing as
Sure.
they did at
If somebody else gets involved.
the mall with the junk sale, I'll call it. What did you guys call it? Rummage sale.
One
I
man's
mean,
trash
you
is
know-
another man's treasure.
Yeah, and those people that ran that marijuana fair at the tourist park, they ran it, right? Those people that run the International Food Fest, they run it. Maybe Randy and I would run the car show.
No.
Pete and I might. We have some of it down.
No.
But you know
run
what?
it yourself.
Yeah, we're all growing older, and
No,
well, you guys are. I'm not.
All right, so we're going to, for the next, I'll put on the next agenda that we'll schedule another work session. Or,
Can we
yeah,
get
because
through
we've
the
got
fire
public
department
works.
fast?
Yeah, we have to do fire department. But
And
in the
public
meantime, we
works?
need to see the CIP too. We need to figure out, not necessarily in the meantime, it doesn't have to be by the next board meeting.
Just your nice little
What
grid
the
that
board
you
needs
gave.
has
to-
anybody else
That's
looked at the
revolving.
fire department budget? It's,
No, I didn't have it.
Do I?
Until
You're
this.
going to talk fire department budget now?
No.
you
No.
could.
Oh, okay.
No,
we're
we're
done.
gonna be done.
We told them
Did
to
you
go.
look at it?
I didn't. Because I didn't know it was in the packet, that's my fault.
So you're wondering if we looked at it?
Lynn, why don't you have it an hour before the,
I think
board meeting?
I don't think there's
Yeah, we
much
could do
to
that.
talk about.
No.
Nobody's here or something.
And if there isn't, why don't we get rid of it?
The fire
Well, we'll
department?
just deal with it next time. We can maybe even cut in a little bit of Lenny's time on water and sewer.
Lenny might be fast. I don't really think there's a lot in any of those budgets.
He's probably interested in talking a lot less than I do.
We'll let him talk first.
So the sheriff's contract and the CIP are the two biggies that we need to make sure we don't lose track of them.
I'm perfectly fine getting a draft of that contract on the agenda.
Okay?
I will try. I can tell you I got nothing done today because it was an events committee meeting this morning and this afternoon.
Yeah.
But I can try to draft the revisions. Hopefully I won't have to type the whole thing. If I have it in Word format, I can get it done pretty quick.
I'm happy to do it if you want to delegate. I can probably get it done pretty quickly. CIP, same thing, because we're pretty close on figuring out that format.
So
He has it in Excel.
it's
The
that
CIP
one
is
page
really,
sheet that you helped me
really
with,
easy.
Lynn.
I know, I built it.
Oh, yeah, no, it just looks
Pardon?
like a little Excel
Yeah,
file.
the only thing that's not on there is the windows.
Yeah.
So I guess
a matter.
change what the planning commission saw before it comes to the board. I don't know that that's the right thing to do.
Did they approve it?
The
As a
planning
whole?
commission, I have to read the minutes to make absolutely sure of what I'm saying, but they support it. They did not support the wheelchair swing, they supported that printer. And I think they supported everything that Lenny asked for, and they supported purchasing an ambulance.
Okay, so interestingly.
That's all he asked for, I think.
The change that you asked to be made was to remove the wheelchair swing for now, and that's in agreement with the planning commission from the CIP perspective.
And then they didn't see the window thing, but.
Right. Yep. And arguably, that could be a maintenance thing, but it's so expensive it has to be a capital improvement.
Is that how they decide if it's over a certain amount of money, it becomes capital improvement?
Budget
Or that's how we
section
decide where the money
It
comes
can
from?
be depreciated.
Yeah,
That's where the.
that's
I don't
why.
know.
So
We'll
like
gotta
a
wait until
rental.
Tuesday to schedule it anyway.
We'll do it on Tuesday at the board meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see how this, everybody's schedules go.
Okay, so adjourn the meeting, right?
Yep, 3:37.
7, okay.